for a parking problem.
And 423.
Yeah, that's where we're gonna 28 from one truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
From one truck, White Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up heading.
So you had 2000. Patrick Spalding.
10-4. If you can just put a little note in something like that, I'm gonna be leaving a note on a vehicle if I can remove it.
What? What? Rockingham 505. 505 enter vandalism case for Athens. Explain it. Soon to be X. Slash her tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Yeah, forgive this at 32.
10-4. You're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4. Look at that. No, 3 in Depot Street. Truck boy entry 5.
7435.
10-4.
10-4.
Can you go 643 again?
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but it just looks like we do.
10-4. I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449 1120.
And 449 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Rockingham 535.
Yeah, that's a great college.
535.
Not me. You guys know for a woman who walked into a house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He's now pounding on the door, trying to get in still. Still 5 foot on dark hair, got tie-dye shirt on, and number 21 is
We have separation. Excuse me. All right, let's see. Can you guys hear me? Let me know. Somebody let me know if you can hear me. Somebody's saying chat. Can you hear me? Martin, hooray. Is that a sign? Somebody please type in, we hear you. Okay, Iris, she's saying yes. Oh, Kelly. All right, thank you. Colin. All right, good. Thanks. I rebooted the computer 20 minutes ago, so I don't know why that had that tech issue, but oh well. All right, so guys, thank you for being here. I don't think I need this at the moment. Thank you for being here to share your Friday night with me. I appreciate it. So we had a lot of new documents and motions today. I haven't lined them up. I have them all downloaded. I hope all of them. And some people, Kim Fair gets me a lot, and Nima and a bunch of other people. So thank you guys. And I don't have them lined up in any particular order, but there's one new one that we'll go over that's pretty interesting. So before we get to that, I hadn't prepared any comments, but I was talking to Thomas Fleming right before we began at 8, and a little off topic, but maybe connected. So we were talking about the Red Sox, and tonight they should be just starting game 2 right around now, and we enjoyed separately watching game 1. Now, I know some of you may not be Red Sox fans, but this isn't really necessarily about the baseball. What it was, so I grew up with the Red Sox and the other sports, but really maybe even the Red Sox more than the others in a way meant everything. Like you knew, I can still name the position of the guys. I can still name each position of the team, what players were playing it all the way back in the 70s. So for instance, 1976 and stuff like that. Oops, sorry, I'm revealing my age. But there's a Red Sox have in other sports, but especially the Red Sox have a value that is more than just sports. There's a cultural connection. It connects us to our dads or the father figures in our lives, connects us to the region. Those things are important. And I felt guilty the last few years, just a few years, that I had kind of lost interest in them. I was aware of it and I felt guilty. I'm like, am I part? There's a lot of things that go into that. And the Rooster, Rick Burleson, got you, Thomas, shortstop. So, you feel this loss. It's one of the reasons we might lose interest in something like baseball is it's a slower sport. And because of the modern world in media and YouTube and everything, we have very short attention spans. But in losing interest in that, you lose some of that heritage, that connection that we all have in this region. Now, of course, there are many people watching this channel right now that are not from New England, but you have your own experience of that, those own cultural heritage things. And so I just wanted to, I don't know, put that out there with you guys. I feel interested in the Red Sox again. I watched yesterday's game. There's some extra excitement because they've made some big signings. That's a big part of it. That's only part of it, though. I feel like maybe there was a few years. The Red Sox have had a lot of success since 2003, 2004. And so maybe too much success, you can kind of take it for granted at some point. And I needed to rekindle that interest. And I feel good about having that back. So maybe we'll feel some point down the road, this little community here will feel the same way. Because the Karen Reed case will be over. And not Kate's. Not sure what that meant, but hey, check. So maybe there'll be a point where we all come back together and discuss our experience of this case a year from now, right? And we'll again feel that connection that we made with good people. And some of the good people that I've made that connection with are actually free Karen Reed people. And because the reality is, even though I know sometimes, let me get rid of that banner before Tom yells at me. Even though I, even myself, sometimes cross the line and get mad at the free Karen Reed people, the reality is that most of them are decent people that just feel something weird happened here. And as long as they're making a legitimate effort to get to the truth and to be fair, then we shouldn't hold that against them. Now, there are some things that go into that. So if you live in the Canton area, and I don't, if you're if you're attacking the McAlberts, you got to really, that's indecent behavior. Even if you believe that Karen Reed is innocent and something weird happened here, to be attacking people based on very thin evidence put out by a defendant who needs to concoct a theory, a third-party culprit theory, an alternative theory as to what happened. She needs to do that. We've seen in the Delphi murders that the defense team discussed this theory that there was an Odinist cult. So I'm just saying there are some things here, but if you're trying to get to the truth, if you're generally aware, or at least have some general common sense that defense teams are going to make things look odd that might not be, that might actually have explanations, which that's the case here. If you have those kind of general things and you at least question the wisdom of whether you should be attacking innocent people, especially if you live in that area. These people are, even from your perspective, you can't be sure that they're involved in a crime. And I'm talking to Free Karen Reed people. So don't you have any hesitation when you look at Allie McCabe and Colin Albert, just college kids who actually came across as normal people came across as normal college kids on the stand. Are you sure you want to destroy their lives by accusing them of being part of a murder conspiracy? That's where I say you really, I guess if you're expressing those theories privately, just you and your family, your friends, then there's no harm being done. But if you're spreading that and you're taking that out on them, that is a level of indecency. Now, I'm not saying you're an all bad person. There are degrees here, right? But that's a level of indecency, and you really need to do some soul searching, I would say. But anyways, there may come a time when we all look back at this a year from now. Hopefully I'm still here with you. And this community is recreated and we all find ourselves in chat again. And we say, hey, I miss these people, So you see all these familiar names in chat that you get to chat with. I wish there was a way we could all meet in person, or as many of us as possible could. Obviously, I'm willing to do that, but I understand that it's going to be really hard because the nature of this crowd is to target anybody. So if I said I'm going to email, if I'm going to meet with a bunch of people anywhere in the state, CPU is going to be there. There are people going to be there taking pictures and trying to find out the names and blast them on social media. So that sucks. All right. So somebody is sending me an email. Let's see what it is. All right. How to join the Discord. So, Bucks and Six. Just check the email because you guys said that Chick had emailed me. So I say that Bucks and Six sent an email too. We've seen Bucks and Six in chat for a long time. He's a good guy. And he was Free Karen Reed. I'm not sure if he still is, but good guy. And so he sent some Bucks pictures, but good to see you, Bucks. See, and I don't know if he still is Free Karen Reed, but that's why I say there's an example of someone that seems to be a very decent person. And, we all know Colin Forrester here, and he's been with us for a long time. And he was someone that when I flipped for months was arguing with me, but politely and so civilly. And it was a pleasure to make his friendship online. And so that's important. All right. So also so we have our first donation, and let's go over again how I want to approach questions, because people still keep coming up with this. What's the best way? I'm going to do the best I can. That's the first thing. And I'm generally been willing to stay on 3.5 hours to answer every single question. So obviously at the end of the show, that's a really good question time. But that doesn't mean I'm not interacting with chat live and trying to see questions and see comments, see entertaining comments by the dude and stuff like that. I want to be able to do that. That's a connection that I want to have with people. So I am going to do that too. But obviously, depending on how many people are here, I can't sit there and you'll know, like if I'm doing this, I'm staring at chat. That's not how that's not a pleasant way to have a conversation. So I'm glancing here and there in chat while I'm trying to look you in the eye and talk to you. And obviously, if I'm looking at a video or a document, I can't even see in chat. So you can always, if it's a question that you really want answered, you can always email me. And so people just asked about the Discord. So anybody that emails me, I'll bring you into the Discord. We're happy to have you. So the email is leitskev, Leitskev, at gmail.com. And I get a lot of emails every day, and I try to respond to everyone. If I do read everyone, and if I don't respond, sometimes like someone is sending, like Kim is sending me and will send me an email during the show. I see the email, I appreciate it, I discuss it on the show, and then I forget to say thanks. But Kim understands, you know. So sometimes I can't always reply, and just shit happens. I'm doing the best I can to deal with it, and I've stayed on. So I don't want to get into the whole health thing, but I do have now fractures and lesions, more of them in my back, and so it won't matter what chair I'm in. But sitting, it's already hurting me now. So sitting in a chair for hours does take a toll. So I'll stay in as long as I can. And that's it. All right. So enough on that. Let's this is supposed to be a fun Friday night, right? So the dude is here, dude. I got the filters in, the gel filters. So I'm going to figure out how to stick them to the sign. And then if that works, it's working pretty good right now, right? But if with those filters, I might be able to put it in the flicker mode, which will look really cool. So, but I still think the sign looks great anyways. So thank you, dude. But it might even look that much cooler once I'm able to get that kind of flickering effect. So the dude abides is, as you guys know, for his great comments here, which he must spend a lot of time thinking of those. But he's the one that surprised me by having this made up. So again, I really appreciate all the friendship that you guys have offered here and have made with each other. This is kind of like being a bartender again. You know, I can't serve you drinks, but it's kind of like building a little community. It'd be great if we could do that. You know, that version of the internet might be a couple years away. All right. So Lazy Susan says, does Hank have Natalie's phone and also email address? He could get it if he wants. So I don't know Hank Brennan. I've never had a conversation with Hank Brennan. I've never had a conversation, despite what. Thank you, Don. I hit the wrong one. Despite what they said in the affidavit today, in the motion today, where the defense is accusing me and Kate and Jen Coffenaffer of leaking information, I think related to the texts from Turtle Boy's phone. So I don't have any information on that. I have no idea what's in those messages. It's absurd. Ironically, and I've never had any communications with anybody from the district attorney's office, from the district attorney himself all the way down to the people that clean up the office at night. I don't know what goes on in there. I've never been in the building. I've never talked to anybody from that building. I have no idea. I don't think I've ever talked to a prosecutor from or an official from any district attorney's office. I've been on shows like with former prosecutor Wayne Dennison on Court TV, and I've had some emails with him, and he's no longer a prosecutor. That's the closest it comes for me, you know. I don't know. Was Krowski a prosecutor ever? Maybe. I mean, so that's it. I don't have any inside information from any of this stuff. Ironically, the only information that I have about what might be in those texts is from Turtle Boy. So a few months ago, I think maybe it was like back in December, we went over the texts. The admin chat of Turtle Boy's Facebook group. I got just checking an email that I got from one of our favorite sources. So I'm not going to pull it up on the screen, but I'm going to just take a look at it. Okay, so this is actually all right. I'm going to come back to this. This is really interesting. Today in a lessee's motion. Oh, okay. So, all right. So I think I do have this motion. So I'm going to read it. So this sounds really interesting. and anonymous mass lawyer just sent me this. His great articles on here. So we'll go find that motion. If I don't have it, I'll ask you guys to send it to me. People were sending me motions all day, and I had other things. I was downloading them but not looking at them. So, Elaine says Krowski worked with Hank in the same DA office. There you go. See, most of these guys get their trial experience initially from being a prosecutor. Same with Bedero. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of his name. He was a New York prosecutor, right? Alan Jackson was a prosecutor. David Yannetti was a prosecutor. That's where they learned their trial experience. So, anyways, the only thing I've ever said about what might be in those texts between Karen and Aiden is based on what he said in that admin chat that we had a source get to us back in, I think, December it was. And so it's the Turtle Boy official Free Karen Reed group, Facebook group. Now that Facebook page was actually launched and still is managed, I believe, by Nick and Jenna Rocco, but they put Turtle Boy official on it. So there was a power battle going on almost a year ago. It was as the first trial was starting. Turtle Boy was pissed because Karen was freezing him out. She had been freezing him out ever since he got out of jail. He didn't like that. He should have been able to understand why they couldn't attach themselves to him, but he couldn't. And then, so he was already angry about that. Then they end up moving the trial to the small court. He doesn't have his press pass yet, and he's not invited. So each family gets to invite a few people. Karen doesn't invite him, and they bring in Nick Rocco. He was seething about that, and then he was seething about however they got to choose who goes on court TV. It was Nick Rocco, and he thought by rights it should be him. So this was eating him up. So he was calling Nick with kind of threatening messages, and to not, I mean, physically threatening, but threatening to kind of expose certain things and stuff like that. And in that, in their admin chat, what he said was, and again, we don't know if this is real. We just know it's what he said. He said that Karen is the one who gave him some of the addresses for the witnesses that they targeted in the Roland rally, for instance, that Karen had told him, had given him a personal message to say to Jen McCabe when they went to harass her at the lacrosse game of her daughter. And that the message was, did you think you could outsmart Karen Reed? And Turtle Boy said that 2 or 3 times. And we all thought it was strange. Like, why would he say that? But apparently she said that. And this is kind of confirmed somewhat that that's her attitude in the documentary when she said, when it comes to Jen McCabe, either I'm going down or you are, is the way she said it. So that kind of is consistent with the way she was thinking. She does see this as a personal battle between her and Jen McCabe. So the only thing I know might be in those texts between Karen and Aiden is based on what Aiden said. That's it. I don't have any source. And I don't even know if they actually have those messages. Aiden could have been making it up. He makes stuff up. He's not an honest guy. He was mad. Or those messages, we know that Karen communicated. She was fearful of her messages being discovered. She knew what she was doing was shady. So she communicated with people over Signal. She reached out to one of my former partners on the channel back in the summer of 2023 over Signal. She communicated with Natalie over Signal. And she communicated with Turtle Boy over Signal. Signal, I'm not an expert on this, but it's an encryption app. And the messages automatically delete after a time that's set, usually like 30 minutes. So did the messages delete? Can they be recovered by the police? I don't know. I have no idea. So I do think that probably, because she was doing that, there probably should be no text messages between Karen and Aiden. Yet we learned, again, not from some source, but from the motion that Hank provided before today's hearing, and from what he said in court. He said there were, he revealed some of the text communications between Karen and Aiden. Now, when they say text, does that mean text message like on your phone when you text message someone? Or is that, like when you're text messaging phone number to phone number? Or is that included the Signal messages? I don't know. So, but when they try to say that I have some kind of leak or source that, it's it's absurd. It's absurd. So, all right, let's get to this document because this is really interesting. Let me see if I can find the correct one. This is what Anonymous just told me. And this is, as you guys know, how much time I've spent trying to establish the timeline of exactly when John was struck. I'm going to have to open a couple here before I figure out which one is. All right, not this one. I've got just a few documents, but let me open them. Notice of reciprocal discovery regarding ARC of witnesses. All right, I went over that one on this morning. Let's see. And if I don't find this, I'll have to reach out to. All right, Commonwealth's motion to compel reciprocal. I think I went down with that one too. All right. Yep. All right, let's see. All right, I'm going to pull this one up on the screen. I don't even actually know what's in it. And if it's not, I'm going to have to ask somebody to get me this document. I don't know. Is Kim here? Kim Fair? Andy Dufresne? All right, so let's pull this up, and hopefully this might be it. Let's see. All right. Commonwealth's pretrial memorandum. All right, so this is not it. So what we're looking for is a lessee's motion to exclude Dr. Welcher. God damn, I know I saw that document. When did this come through? All right, so if anybody has, I probably have it somewhere, but I haven't. It'll be easier for me if someone else has it, so they can just email it to me. So if you can email me a lessee's motion to exclude Dr. Welcher. Maybe that's an older motion. I don't remember now, but so I probably have it in my list somewhere and I can't remember. So please send me that if you guys have that. If Anonymous is listening, send me that PDF and I will open it up. But so according to Anonymous, he says that Welcher, remember Welcher is the accident reconstructionist, supremely qualified for the state. He says in his report that per report from Ian Whiffen, that's interesting, that O'Keefe's cell phone data showed, most notably, that all device lock events, including the final lock event at 12:32:09, were initiated by the user pressing the side button briefly. So that would seem that John was still alive at 12:32:09 because he pressed the sidebar. Now, that is perfectly consistent, although it doesn't reveal anything about it, with my contention that John was struck sometime around 12:32 and 12 seconds. Now, I believe the state will know exactly what time, even if there was no new chip-off data. But Hank implied in the hearing a couple of weeks ago or last week that the new chip-off data includes timestamp. Well, he said time and place. So that time and place would be timestamps and GPS. But we don't know specifically what's on that. But we do know, and even in the first trial, Trooper Garino, because he didn't know how important it was to do this correlation between the vehicle data, which Trooper Joe Paul had, and the phone data, which Trooper Garino had. Neither one of these guys knew what the other guys had, so neither one could make that all-important correlation. I'm the one that made it. Unfortunately, it needed to be somebody better than me, but I made it during the trial or just after the trial, and Chick from the Bricks helped me make that document that showed it. So we know that and it took me a few weeks after the trial of really studying it to get this drilled down to the time, but it's not complicated. So as I said many times, Karen did a 3-point turn on Cedar Crest when they missed the turn onto Fairview. Now, in the data that Trooper Guarino should have every single GPS point. So, for instance, he located on the map, I think it was Mapleview Street. It's the street that connects to Cedar Crest. And he said, this is exactly where they were when Rich Green says, and I forget the time, but it was like 12:22 something, where Rich Green says this is where John began climbing stairs, or at least that's the period when that stair climbing began. So he was able to put that. So I think Trooper Guarino could have put down every single GPS point, including the time. So thank you, Frank. So that GPS, so Trooper Guarino presumably could have, if he wanted to, if he knew the importance of it, find out exactly what time that 3-point event occurred. But he did put down what time Karen missed the left-hand turn, and that was at 12:23, 46 seconds, exact time. And we know that he probably may know that from Waze too, because that's probably when Waze, when you miss your turn, Waze has to recalculate, and it sends you basically a message. So that may be also why he knew that time. And so now they have to turn around and come back, and we know what time she does make the right-hand turn. Again, that's probably known from Waze, and it also should be able to be accessed from the raw GPS data. And that was at 12:24, 18 seconds. So it's in the middle of that, somewhere in the middle of that Karen does a 3-point turn on Cedar Crest. So, could be, in theory, could be 12:23 and 58 seconds. Could be 12:24. 12:24, 2 seconds, 12:24, 4 seconds, somewhere in the middle. If you put it right in the middle, it's at 12:24:02. Now, we also know that whenever she did make that 3-point turn, and it's from the moment that she struck the gas in reverse at over 30%, according to Trooper Paul. And Trooper Paul did a good job pointing all this stuff out. It was that's what triggered the creation of an event. That's where the algorithm said, this is unusual. Let's create an event for the record. That's how the algorithm works. And so from that moment, the clock is ticking again, because 8 minutes and 4 seconds after that moment, when she hits the gas at 30% in reverse, 8 minutes and 4 seconds after that, she triggers the creation of the next event. And these are the only 2 events in the life of the car that are triggered in the data. And that next event is triggered because now she puts it in reverse, slamming it at over 70%, and the car reaches 24.2 miles an hour. So that's 8 minutes and 4 seconds, and it's 4 seconds into that event that you get the telltale signs of a pedestrian strike. So that means 8 minutes and 8 seconds after Karen did the 3-point turn, or began the 3-point turn. Technically, it's after she hit the gas more than 30% while in reverse. So from that moment, 8 minutes and 8 seconds. So if we guess that somewhere in the middle, so let's say she made the 3-point turn at 12:24 and 2 seconds. Well, 8 minutes and 8 seconds after that would be when John was struck. And that would be at 12:32 and 10 seconds. So, but based on this data here that says John was still hitting his phone at 12:32:09. So I would say maybe Karen made the 3-point turn at 12:24:03 or 12:24:04. Let's say she made it. And I think I've ended up speculating here that the most likely time she made it was at 12:24:04. So then you got to go 8 minutes and 8 seconds from that, and that's when John was struck. So 8 minutes and 8 seconds from 12:24:04, that gives you a time of 12:32 and 12 seconds, which is what I've been saying. If I had to make a guess, that's the exact moment. And then John's phone last moves at 12:32 and 16 seconds. So And people say, well, why are you making a guess? Because I don't know exactly what time that 3-point turn was. We know roughly when it was. It was in the middle of the missed turn onto Fairview and then the final right-hand turn onto Fairview. So I've been saying it was probably, so figure when you're on a dark street and you miss your turn. Now you've got to look for a place to turn around. So you drive slow for a second and you're kind of looking. So I would say that the 3-point turn is probably not exactly in the middle between the missed turn and then the final turn on right. Maybe a little bit later than that because it probably takes a few seconds to look for that place to make a turn. So that's why I say it was probably around 12:24 and 4 seconds, something like that. But we'll definitely have this data, even if there was no chip off data. We'll get more and more accurate GPS data from Trooper Garino, but I think we're also going to get it from even more, particularly from the new chip off data. All right, let's see. All right, we're going to come back to that because I'm pretty sure some people just emailed me the document, and this is something that people just put out, a document just released, or I just got my hands on this just before the show, so I haven't read it here yet. So Commonwealth's it looks like potentially interesting. Let's see. Commonwealth's pre-trial memorandum proposed statement of facts to the jury. All right. This does sound promising. On the morning of January 29th at approximately 6:04 a.m., the Canton Police Department received a 911 call reporting an unresponsive male party in the snow outside a residence at 34 Fairview. Officers responded and discovered the male party, subsequently identified as John O'Keefe, off the roadway in the front lawn area. Officers identified 3 women with Mr. O'Keefe, one of whom was the defendant, Karen Reed. The defendant had been with Mr. O'Keefe the previous evening at 2 different bars in Canton and had driven with him to this residence in the early morning hours of this date. John was treated by paramedics from the Canton Fire Department and transported to Good Samaritan Hospital, where he was subsequently pronounced deceased. The Commonwealth alleges that the defendant struck John with her vehicle earlier that morning and then left the scene while John lay injured in the snow during a blizzard. The defendant denies that she hit the wrong button, that she committed any crimes. Let me pull up the next one. All right. Proposed stipulations. This is part of the same document. The Commonwealth proposes the following stipulations to be entered as evidence at trial. In lieu of testimony by the keepers of records for different institutions where the Commonwealth obtained surveillance videos, the defendant agrees to the authenticity of each video. In lieu of testimony by the keepers of records for C.F. McCarthy's and Waterfall Bar and Grill, the defendant agrees to the authenticity of the restaurant receipts. In lieu of testimony by the keepers of records, in lieu of testimony, the defendant agrees to the authenticity of her audio and video recorded statements made during interviews with reporter Gretchen Voss, Boston Magazine, reporter Matt Gutman, ABC News. Isn't that Court TV's reporter? I thought that was Court TV's reporter. I'm probably wrong, but I know, isn't that guy's name Matt? Anyways, reporter Dennis Murphy, NBC, and reporter Ted Daniels, Boston 25. All right, so this stipulation also includes any recorded statement made by the defendant to ABC, including ABC News 2020, the Good Morning America, NBC Universal, including Dateline, and any statements of the defendant to Terry Muir of Unsolved Productions or appearing in a body in the snow. So maybe Anonymous can help me out with this one if you're watching. Does this mean that they succeeded in getting the material from that? Because we had not seen any of this. Well, we had not seen most of this entered into discovery. So we know, for instance, that ABC, American Broadcasting Companies, I think owned by Disney, right, that they had fought this and they weren't. And so Adam Lally was not able to get it. And I had not seen it entered into discovery. So I had assumed that they hadn't got it. 2020, same thing. Does this mean they have it? NBC Universal, Dateline, same thing. I didn't think they had any of these things, but does this mean that they were able to get them. So this would be interesting because what they would get is not just what we saw on the TV for those shows, but all of the footage. That's my understanding, anyways, right? I'm just a bartender, dude. So if I'm wrong on that, please somebody set me straight. And again, just so you guys know, while I am looking at this document, I cannot see chat. So now is a good time to say in chat, hey, Kev, you smell. I won't see it. I won't. Hey, Kev, you a baldy? That was when I was on recently with one of the shows that I did that Kate was in. Her chat is kind of the Wild West. And this guy kept repeating like every 10 seconds, you baldy, you baldy. I was like, are you, why do you think it wasn't entertaining once, but why would you repeat that like 30 times? Like, it's really strange. Like, I would never want to go in and, I don't know. When you're a kid on the schoolyard, you get into these insult games, but some insults are embarrassing because they just reflect on you if they're not clever enough or entertaining enough. Thomas Fleming is very good at making the entertaining insult. You're not going to beat Thomas Fleming. But Thomas Fleming would be very disappointing in himself if he wanted to get into an insult game with me and all we did was, or anybody, and and the best he could come up with is, hey, baldy. All right. So I'm curious, hopefully Anonymous will email what he thinks on this. Did they get this testimony? In lieu of testimony, the keeper of records, the defendant agrees to the authenticity of statements attributed to her in the 2-part Vanity Fair article. Interesting. Hopefully they get all this. In lieu of testimony by the keeper of records, the defendant agrees to the authenticity of William Reed, Janet Reed, and Nathan Reed's recorded statements to Ted Daniels for Boston 25. The parties agreed that the known DNA standard for John O'Keefe may be admitted without testimony from the forensic scientist that created. All right, so this is good. So I'm not a lawyer, right? So it's a learning process for me too. But you can see if the defense agrees to these facts, then you don't have to bring in some necessarily. If they don't agree, then you have to bring in. So, for instance, here you would have to bring in Miss Sophie Horizon that created that test. But I mean, there has to be a way for this to be introduced to the jury. So that leaves that challenge. But, you're trying to eliminate some of the baggage that's unnecessary. Like if the defense knows that this is going to be introduced as a fact, there's no point fighting it, So that's my interpretation of it. But again, I'm new to most of this. I'm new to all this, right? So the parties also agree that the standard may be used and referenced by analysts from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, or Bodie, and UC Davis Veterinary Genetics Lab. So all those people had access and had a professional reason to use that evidence. So remember, it's the criminologists that come in and talk about this testing for Bodie that showed there was no DNA on John O'Keefe's clothing, and also that showed that the hair found on the rear panel was John's. All right. And so the defense may not agree to some of these things. All right. So in lieu of testimony by the keeper of records, the defendant agrees to the authenticity of her medical treatment records and the medical treatment records of John O'Keefe and the admissibility of such records. In lieu of testimony by the keeper of records, the defendant agrees to the authenticity of reports generated by the Canton Fire Department. So I don't know. You guys can. This seems like a way, if you can find certain things that can help the trial move faster. I don't know. I'm sure there's another reason for it that I don't know. All right. So, and this is the last page of the document. And so this has to do with Aperture. This is the accident reconstruction company hired by the prosecution for this second trial. They were not in the first trial. So testimony of Andy Klein, Mike Morelli. The defendant stipulates that on September 23rd, 2024, Aperture inspected, photographed, and measured and laser scanned the defendant's Lexus and John O'Keefe's Traverse. So they lined up the vehicles to see if backing into the Traverse could have broken Karen's taillight. And the area outside, they also measured the area outside 34 Fairview Road. In October 2nd, the driveway and surrounding area of One Meadows Avenue were photographed and laser scanned. Finally, it says, additionally, the Commonwealth proposes when questioning witnesses for uniformity and efficiency, the parties agree to use the transcripts from the prior trial. Oh, interesting. That do not contain the sidebar conversations. Interesting. So I do. I wish that I had a lawyer on to explain this more comprehensively and more meaningfully. So we do have Heather here who will explain it, hopefully in chat for us. So she says, if they agree as the authenticity, they don't need to lay evidentiary predicates, fewer witnesses, and faster trial. So she said in a much smarter way what I was interpreting in the same way. So thank you, Heather. Of course. What would we do without Heather? All right, let me see if the other documents came in. Kim came through as always. And I have a message from Frank too, or Wessling. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. So let me do Kim's document first. Oops. All right. So yeah, thank you. You came through as always, Kim. This is the defendant's response to redacted presentation of Commonwealth's witness for Judson, Dr. Welcher. Let's see if I can make this bigger. All right. Always a bonus when you can make it bigger. Now comes the defendant. And her motion to exclude Dr. Welcher and requests for voir dire and the defendant's correction would supplement the defendant's motion. All right. The defendant identified numerous defects in the proffered testimony of Dr. Welcher. Given the magnitude and obvious nature of these defects, including the lack of cogency and even clarity related to his methodology. So we saw a lot of this discussed in the hearing with Alessi. You may have slept through that part, I understand. His repeated straying beyond the permissible scope of his expertise and his intrusion into the province of the jury by attempting to evaluate the credit fact witnesses. The Commonwealth agreed to revise and redact Dr. Welcher's materials. This alteration was to include a significant reduction in the size of the presentation, which was originally 140 slides. We heard that discussed, and to remove the many defects. So this was in that, so Dr. Welcher prepared this long slide list with a bunch of things in it, and Hank Brennan agreed that they didn't need or intend to use all of them. So during that hearing, Alessi and Brennan agreed to try to work it out. Now, that was never going, this motion was inevitable. Whatever, the defense was obviously not going to be satisfied with everything that Hank offered. So on the evening of March 24th, so that was last week, that was 4 days ago, the Commonwealth produced to defense a supposedly revised presentation. Unfortunately for the defendant, the only real difference between the original presentation and the now redacted one is the redaction of images of John from the hospital and autopsy. See the original presentation. All right, the redacted presentation is still the exact same size and length, 140 slides, and none of the defendant's concerns with its contents, which the Commonwealth acknowledged and agreed with and committed to the court that it would resolve by removal, have been addressed. I have a feeling Hank would not agree with that. As the Commonwealth has failed yet again to sufficiently show that Dr. Welcher's methodology, that's the key word. You remember, that was our drinking game. Whenever Leslie's up there, every time we hear the word mythology, you have to take a sip. Is commonly accepted in the relevant scientific community, or that it satisfies the Dauber and Lanigan factors, and failed to properly narrow the scope of his testimony. The entirety of Dr. Welcher's proposed testimony must now be excluded. This is not, he knows that this is not, he knows this motion is going to be denied, but they're hoping to use this, set this up as a basis for appeal. All right. Neither the defendant nor the court should bear the consequences of this recalcitrance and the apparent attempt of the Commonwealth to yet again use the proximity of the start of trial to cause decision making that reflects such proximity rather than the merits of the arguments of the defense. So, I mean, hey, unless these arguments, he understands this Dobbert Lanigan stuff maybe as well as anybody, but there's also a standard of reasonableness, and it can be applied both ways. So, Hank when he had tried to exclude Dr. Russell, did the same thing. What's your methodology? And so it isn't important to understand that. But I think there's a balance there. If the expert is truly qualified, it's going to be allowed. Dr. Russell is qualified. Dr. Welcher is qualified. And there are some things that just you're not going to find. For instance, if you're going to do a test, you may not find proper basis for it in the literature. So let's look at the ARCA guys. They manufactured a cocktail glass cannon. Now, was that referenced by some study in the literature? I doubt it. Now, I personally have no problem with doing that test. My problem with ARCA is plenty of other things. But if their theory was that maybe John threw the cocktail glass, look, other people on both sides have had. Well, I shouldn't say both sides. People on the anti-Karen side have had that theory. So there's nothing wrong with it. And why not test it? And so they tested it to see exactly what speed that glass would have to be going to cause that damage. I'm sure they didn't have a basis for it in the literature, but it was allowed, and it will be allowed. In other words, so let's continue. In other words, it is the Commonwealth, not the defendant or the court, that should bear the consequences of the Commonwealth's recalcitrance. All right. In all the defendant's papers related to Dr. Welcher's proposed testimony and an oral argument on March 20th, the defendant has raised the two following primary issues that are fatal to Dr. Welcher's ability to testify as an expert. And when you look at I have a link somewhere to this guy's qualifications. I mean, this is like saying Einstein is not qualified to talk about the theory of relativity. It's ridiculous. His qualifications are, I don't know if you got anybody with more, but they're over the top. I mean, this guy been doing this a long time. It's what his company does, and it's what he does. So, all right, beyond Dr. Welcher's total lack of clear explication of his own methodology, across the entirety of his proffered materials, neither Dr. Welcher nor the Commonwealth at any point discuss how Dr. Welcher's methodology is commonly accepted in the relevant scientific technical community. All right, so how is it commonly accepted for the ARCA guys to build a cocktail glass cannon? You're not going to find that in the literature, but they're qualified, all right, to run. They have a reasonable basis for running such an experiment. How else are you going to test whether the glass could break the taillight if a human being threw it? All right. Alternately, how it meets the apt Dobbert Lanigan factors as is required for his certification as an admissible expert. That's crazy. And Dr. Welcher's proposed testimony veers far outside of the scope of his qualifications and expertise. For example, only drawing medical conclusions untethered, he likes that word too, to force calculations and crediting the testimony of other select witnesses. In all the materials which the Commonwealth has produced, including the original presentation, the redacted presentation, and Dr. Welcher's letter, the methodology used for any of the several tests and wayward experiment of Dr. Welcher conducted in preparation for testifying is not stated with any scientific method. You take a half a sip on that, or any clarity at all, let alone legally supported by the Dobbert Lanigan discussion. The experiments conducted by Dr. Welcher, which were apparently prepared solely for the instant litigation for this case, included the blue paint experiment and the drop test experiment, and are not accompanied by a mandatory discussion of their acceptance in the appropriate scientific community or replicability. All right, this is nuts. All right, this is the problem with this idea from Dobbert Lanigan, or at least Alessi's interpretation of it, that any single experiment has to be based on some literature. That's not even science. Look, in science, you come up with a theory, and then you come up with a way to test it. And if you're a qualified scientist, that's what you do. That's science. All right. Now, maybe that test is something that has some reference in the literature, but often it's not going to be. And so it's sad. Now, we don't know what this test is, but I'm just going to guess here that if you have something involving paint, I'm probably way off, but they're probably trying to come up with an alternative explanation for John's injuries. Could the internal structure of the taillight housing, which is exposed once the plastic cover is broken off, have created those injuries? And I would think it's a pretty clever way to do that by using some kind of paint. I'm just, like I said, I'm just guessing. But if you could take that taillight housing and dip it in paint, blue paint, and press that against some kind of a recreation, such as a dummy, to see if it made something similar to that. For them to not, you're not going to have some basis in the literature for doing that. How could you? Just no more than you have a basis for creating a cocktail glass cannon. So, I don't know what the drop test experiment was. But again, these are just good faith efforts by legitimate scientists. Each accident, every accident, is unique. And so this accident definitely has some unique aspects to it. One, because it's in reverse. Two, because it was just a clip, to use Karen's words. And three, because, well, this is really part of two, but you have these, well, three, because the fatal injury was not actually caused by the vehicle. And so you have limited injuries on John from the vehicle. So this is, I'm not, like I said, every accident is probably unique to some degree, but even this is probably something that you don't know. This is definitely a little bit more unique than normal. Normally, if you have a pedestrian, if you have a hit and run and it leads to a fatality, I'm going to guess that normally there's a much more direct impact. In theory, it could happen where it happens in the city and someone gets a side swipe and they hit their head on the cement or on a wall or something like that. Maybe it's happened before. I don't know. But it's unusual, too, that the vehicle's going in reverse. All right. So these experiments are not accompanied by a mandatory discussion of their acceptance in the appropriate scientific community or replicability in any of the Commonwealth's materials because they're unique. All right. Further, Dr. Welcher, who is not a medical doctor, forensic pathologist, or medical examiner, attempts to opine on the medical cause and manner of Mr. O'Keefe's death when he proffers that the totality of the evidence is consistent with the right rear corner of Karen's Lexus impacting John and striking the rear posterior aspect of his head on the ground, on the frozen ground. That's what an accident reconstruction does. I don't want a emergency room physician doing brain surgery on me. I want a brain surgeon doing that. So an emergency room physician, such as Dr. Russell, yes, she has some, or even as the medical examiner in this case, Scotty Bella, of course they have relevant opinions to what happened to John, but that's nowhere going to be as nearly as qualified as an accident reconstructionist. So this is really absurd. The claim that it has to be a medical doctor, it's nuts. All right. Especially when this accident reconstructionist is going to use the conclusions drawn up by the medical examiner. That's part of the evidence, his analysis. So he's not performing the autopsy. He's reading the results of the autopsy. That's how we want it done. All right. So example 2, Dr. Welcher's letter. On several occasions, through Dr. Welcher's letter and the presentations, he impermissibly credits the testimony of other select witnesses, including Julie Nagel, Richard D'Antono, Ryan Nagel, Heather Maxson, Jennifer McCabe, and Ian Whiffen. So I don't know what the rules are on that, but it seems to me that if you're able to hire an accident reconstructionist, you want to give him the information that is needed to help put together what happened. Needs all the information. All right. So I want Dr. Russell. See, this accident reconstructionist is doing what the ARCA guys did not do, what Dr. Russell did not do, what Rich Green did not do. He's looking at all of the evidence, all of the relevant evidence. They avoided doing that because they were not trying to get to the truth. They were trying to argue to a conclusion that they knew what they had to do. They knew the conclusion they had to reach. So they didn't want, they deliberately excluded evidence that didn't further that. All right. Dr. Welcher's presentation. He says, no witness, this is Dr. Welcher, neither a lay witness nor an expert may offer an opinion regarding the credibility of another witness. No, I'm sorry. I don't know what that's from. That's no witness. See, Dr. Welcher's letter. It sounds, no, I'm sorry. They're quoting from Commonwealth First Quint. No witness, neither a lay witness nor an expert may offer on an opinion regarding the credibility of another witness. Well, it doesn't sound like he's offering an opinion on the credibility of the other witnesses. He's taking their reports and just factoring them in. Such testimony impermissibly intrudes on the jury's province to assess the credibility of the witness. Sorry, such testimony impermissibly intrudes on the jury's province to assess the credibility of the witness. I mean, no, Welcher is doing what we want an accident reconstructionist to do, to look at all the relevant evidence and come up with a report. That's what, in a rational, sane world, which I know this is not, that's what you want to happen. So, unless he says, quoting another case, that such testimony, the kind where an expert witness assesses the credit, he's not assessing the credibility of these witnesses. Yes, he may apply. I don't know. Is he applying some level of credibility? I mean, the witnesses inside Ricky D'Antono's truck, they have no reason to lie. So he's just taking a combination of all this evidence and putting it together. So, yeah, he hits it this again and again, vouching for the credibility. I don't see any evidence that Welcher's doing that. All right, acknowledging the glaring problems with Dr. Welcher's proposed testimony, the Commonwealth stated at oral argument on March 20th that any reference to witness testimony needs to be redacted. So he's saying that Brennan had agreed that any reference to the witness's testimony needs to be redacted. Opinions on credibility needs to be redacted. But there are different demonstrations that we do expect as far as extraneous commentary. And no, that's not intended. It's not proper. We wouldn't try to use it. So I don't know. There are mistakes that get made. We saw one this morning where Hank admitted that he misunderstood what the Judge Sisiski, or whatever his name is, when Sisiski had said last week that he asked him, do you want the messages between Karen's lawyers and Turtle Boy? And Hank said no. And then he testified today that he thought he was talking about Turtle Boy's lawyers. But that was a blunder. So I don't know. Is this going to be a blunder here? I don't know. So if Hank admitted that witness testimony needs to be redacted, opinions on credibility need to be redacted, but there are different demonstrations that we do expect. Well, but is a powerful world, so I don't know if what comes in under the but there are different demonstrations. That's not clear. I don't know. As far as extraneous commentary, no, that's not intended. So I guess a lot's going to hinge on what in Welcher's report consists of extraneous commentary. Hank says it's not proper and we wouldn't try to use it. In reference to the length of Dr. Welch's original presentation, the court asked if the Commonwealth intends to use all 140 slides. And Hank said, no, that is, we were comprehensive in the production of the defense so they could see the data points, how it was produced. And so we've included, you see, many of the slides in the camera showing the different downloads. All right. So my sense of when Hank said that was that he's trying to be very fair to the defense. So he could have narrowed it down just to the ones that they intend to present in trial. But he said, I'm going to give you the whole thing so you get a fuller sense of what Dr. Welcher did. But again, we'll see. And he says there's only a fraction of that we would show, and it sounds like he didn't reduce it very much. I don't know. We'll see. So addressing Dr. Welcher's crediting of other witnesses' testimony, the Commonwealth stated that Dr. Welcher will not talk about opinions or testimony of witnesses, including Jenna McCabe, Julie Nagel, and the Ford documents. Who's Julie McCabe? This Julie Albert, this Allie McCabe. I don't think there's a Julie McCabe. It's late. Am I losing it? I don't know. Unfortunately, for both the defendant and the court, and contrary to the representations of counsel for the Commonwealth in court, Dr. Welcher's redacted presentation does not remedy the concerns raised. Slides 103 through 121 still contain an unchanged depiction of the blue paint experiment. All right, you're not getting rid of the blue paint experiment. That's completely relevant. Look, the defense is allowed to go up there and say, based on very limited methodology, that those are dog bites. It's basically Dr. Russell saying those look like dog bites to me. So the state needs to give up their own. I was shocked that we didn't see in the first trial any attempt to explain how John's wounds, how those parallel wounds on his arms. There were basically, I think, 3 sets of parallel wounds. What was the state? They knew for over a year that the defense was saying those were dog bites. So I expected that the state was going to have some piece of a taillight up there and have an explanation. This is how it was made. And we didn't get that at all, which was shocking. So, Alessi says there's no discussion of Dr. Welch's methodology at all in the entire redacted presentation, and certainly no reference to a potential methodology's acceptance. It drives me crazy saying this. The idea that this is going to be relevant scientific literature on how to, if I'm correct, put paint on a taillight to show that those things, crazy. In Dr. Welcher's redacted presentation, he retains his impermissible conclusions as to the cause and manner of Mr. O'Keefe's death, which clearly lie outside the scope of his expertise. He's an accident reconstructionist. Unless he's trying to say because he's not a medical doctor that he can't opine on it. But he can, because he can take the report of the medical doctor. That he's not offering an opinion on the credibility of that doctor. It's just like taking everything that everything that Welcher is using here, everything is evidence that some other expert collected. All right. So if he's looking at the vehicle data, that was collected by Trooper Joe Paul. If he's looking at GPS, and I don't know what goes into it, but he's looking at evidence collected by Trooper Garino on the vehicle. If he's looking at where the debris field is, those pieces of evidence were documented by the crime scene people during the course of those 3 weeks. And that report was ultimately put together professionally by Joe Paul. So he is automatically using information put together by other people. It's absurd to think that he wouldn't. It's absurd. Did they think he's going to go back in time to investigate these things themselves? I don't even understand what Alessi is really trying to say here. So this section includes Dr. Welcher's determination that the Lexus hit John by considering images of evidence found at 34 Fairview. So, yeah, that evidence was collected by someone else, cell phone data by someone else, medical images and notes, autopsy and the ER people the images of Mr. O'Keefe from the hospital. On slide 135, Dr. Welcher concludes that the defendant hit John because the physical evidence at the scene, the lacerations to his right arm, and the skull fracture location, and the absence of other fractures, and that John's skull fracture pattern and location are consistent with ground contact and not an assault. So he's an accident reconstructionist. This is what he's going to do. I would, to me, if someone's a medical doctor, an emergency room doctor, they'd be utterly unqualified to make those determinations. So nobody's perfectly qualified. Nobody's trained exactly where they're a medical doctor that is now assigned to do an accident reconstruction. That's an unreasonable level of expectation. Dr. Welcher uses medical terminology to determine that the totality of the evidence is consistent with the right rear corner impacting John, and John striking his head on the frozen ground. Dr. Welcher is not a medical examiner, forensic pathologist, nor a cell phone forensics expert. Doesn't have to be a cell phone forensics expert. He's applying the conclusions of the cell phone forensics expert. That's what science is. These conclusions are beyond the scope of his expertise. Incredibly, despite express statements to the contrary, the redacted presentation maintains the impermissible grounds upon which Dr. Welcher bases his conclusions, including the crediting of eyewitness testimony. This is feeling repetitive now, which, no, surprise, surprise, unless he wrote it, it's repetitive and it's long. Dr. Welcher still concludes that there is no physical evidence to indicate the taillight was broken as of approximately 5:08 a.m. There isn't, because they hadn't collected any pieces yet. So this conclusion is not based in fact, and although the Commonwealth must have communicated the necessity of changing it as evidenced by the altered text on the slide, the baseless conclusion remains. I don't think this is worded well. I think what they mean is that there is no physical evidence to indicate that the taillight was broke from that collision at 5:08. I think this is not, it's poorly worded. Sadly, man, as a writer, I get frustrated with a lot of these documents, and it doesn't seem to matter who's writing them. There's a lot of mistakes. Maybe I know they're writing things on the fly, but Jesus, you could run these things through ChatGPT or have an assistant work it. I believe what he means is there's no physical evidence to indicate that Karen broke her taillight when she backed into the Traverse. Such a poorly worded thing. It's so poorly worded, I'm not sure if that's what it means, but this conclusion is not based in fact, and although the Commonwealth must have communicated the necessity of change. All right, I already read that. On numerous occasions in the redacted presentation, as he did in the original presentation, Welcher inappropriately usurps the power of the jury by making factual determinations as to the credibility of the witnesses. He credits the expert testimony of Ian Whiffen by saying, per report from Ian Whiffen, John's cell phone data showed, most notably, all device lock events. So this is, I mentioned this earlier, from Anonymous sent this to me. So Ian Whiffen is now, he wasn't tasked to do any of this in the first trial. His role has been expanded here. So he's now been tasked to get much more forensic data from John's phone. And so apparently Ian has concluded that all device lock events, including the final lock event at 12:32:09, were user initiated by the user pressing the side button briefly. On slide 37, Welcher credits the testimony of Julie Nagel. So why? I don't. This is if you're going to. There's probably somewhere in here you could make a point if you're Alessi. But if your point is that Dr. Welcher, who is taking together all the evidence, that he should now become a forensic forensic data guy, and he has to learn how to examine a phone on his own. It's absurd. It's absurd. Yeah, the judge is going to see this as absurd. He credits the testimony of Julie Nagel and the other members of not seeing John O'Keefe. Well, that's their testimony. So they did not see damage to the Lexus because it had not happened yet. Well, I don't even think the defense is saying that it was damaged before that time. They're saying that they damaged it, that she damaged it in the driveway. Did not see John ever because he was still in or near the Lexus when they drove off 2 minutes before. Well, I will say this, nobody knows. So in fairness, they can only testify to what they did see, really. I mean, when they can testify to what they didn't see, but we don't know what that means. You can never know what it means when you didn't see something. So it's nighttime right now, and if I drive down the street and there's a body on the lawn and I don't see it, I can only testify that I didn't see it. That doesn't mean there is a body on the lawn, right? It just means I didn't see anything. So the people in the truck didn't see John get out of the car. That doesn't mean he didn't. But it's a factor that you can put in there. So, despite explicit confirmation by the Commonwealth that such impermissible reliance would be removed, the statements remain. So, I don't know what the law is on these. I don't think it really matters if you remove things like that. What the witnesses in the truck saw, but you got to leave in things like Ian Whiffin's report. He's all right. As all parties well know by now, the touchstone of admissibility is reliability. The Commonwealth has had 3 independent opportunities to establish any reliability for Dr. Welcher's testimony, but has failed to do so each time. Dr. Welcher's original report and letter retain the foundational problems. All right, so they're saying because the problems remain, you got to remove Dr. Welcher. All right, an oral argument, it's not going to happen. An oral argument on March 20th. The Commonwealth acknowledged and conceded the several and serial deficiencies. So, I hope it's not the case that, and it sounds like they quoted that Mr. Brennan did concede that and then left him in anyways. It does seem like a little bit of a problem to me. So I don't know. I would hope he would see the wisdom to have either have not had conceded it in the first place, or if he did concede it, to remove some of those things. So in fact, the most significant change made to Dr. Welcher's original presentation was redacting nearly all images of John from the hospital and autopsy. Although this likely should have been the standard procedure from the beginning, the Commonwealth has employed this substantively inconsequential, and that's true, it is inconsequential, update as a red herring to distract from the still present deficiencies of the redacted presentation. The defense does not recall raising a problem of redacting photos of Mr. O'Keefe. Even something as simple as reducing the size of the presentation below the gargantuan and unworkable 140 slides to something resembling a fraction of what the Commonwealth would show, Dr. Welcher and the Commonwealth failed to make good on. Although once is more than enough, the Commonwealth's repeated failure to satisfy the necessary common law requirements for demonstrating the reliability of expert testimony mandates the exclusion of Dr. Welcher's testimony. So that's not going to fly. As a final note, during the March 25th hearing, when discussing Dr. Welcher's redacted presentation, the Commonwealth stated the following: I can be clear, there is no new information. The statement that Dr. Welcher's redacted presentation contains no new information is inaccurate. Slide 36 replaces a video of an aerial view of 34 Fairview with snow on the ground to a cartoonish mock-up of what appears to be a parking lot. Dr. Welcher's presentation at slide 36. While the meaning of this change is unclear, slide 102 materially changes the language of the conclusion as compared to the original presentation. Dr. Welcher's presentation at 102 lists a bunch of slides that it's different. One slide diagram of the yard. I mean, this sounds petty. Just reading through the footnotes, seeing if there's anything interesting here. The right rear taillight of the Lexus was not broken by contact between Karen Reed's Lexus and John O'Keefe's Chevy Traverse. So there it's stated more clearly there. And there's no physical evidence to indicate that the taillight was broken at this time. So when you look at it in the full context, it's written more clearly. Conclusion, the Commonwealth has repeatedly failed to show that Dr. Welcher's methodology is sufficiently... All right, this is just going to be a Leslie repeating shit. So, all right, enough on that. So, I suspect that my back may not hold up as well as it usually does. So let's first go to the thank yous and then go to the questions. I don't think I have too much else to do beyond that. It's already 9:20. All right. So does Hank have Natalie's phone? Right. Thank you for the donation, Lazy. I don't know the answer. Thank you very much, Don. And my cat and I, can we buy you a pair of AirPods? Actually, I have AirPods. I just don't love them. But I have a pair of AirPods. Maybe I'll start using them, get used to them, because the headset, I'm a short sleeve shirt kind of guy. I'm always warm, even in the winter, and the headset does make you retain heat and you get hot. So maybe I'll get used to using them. But thank you, my cat. I do have a set of that. Lazy Susan, I wasn't accusing you about the sources. Oh no, I know, Lazy Susan. I didn't take it the wrong way. I was asking two questions. Do you know if Natalie's phone is in evidence? And what's your email address? Sorry. No, it's okay, Lazy. I hope I didn't give you a wrong impression. My email is leitskev, LEITSKEV @gmail.com. And I don't know why Natalie's phone would be in evidence for the Karen Reed case. So I'm going to say no. It would be in evidence for the potential. There was a grand jury, and this seems to be allusion to another grand jury. I think it was alluded to today at the hearing, which I don't know, may or may not exist. And these juries can only go on for 90 days. So I don't know, what the current status is of any of that. But last year, there was a grand jury that did not have, at that time, any of these phone messages from Karen or for Aiden. But it was apparently an attempt to indict them on conspiracy to intimidate witnesses or something like that. They have Natalie's phone records for that. So, but I don't think they would have it for, I don't know. Maybe I've never seen it entered into discovery. I'm not sure. There could be something in there that would go towards consciousness of guilt, which Hank is pursuing. So there could be something in there. Unfortunately, I can't say. Great show as always, K-Dog. Thank you, dude. Appreciate it, my man. You're my man. All right. Lazy Susan again. Hope she's not mad at me. Final stipulation. Karen did it. All right, Lazy. And Don, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, so let's go to questions. And I'm going to hang in there as long as I can. So I'm going to try to read everybody's comments and questions as much as I can. It's limited. Something distracts me. Oh, what did Frank send me? I forgot to go back to that. Hold on a second. Hold on a second, guys. So it's a long message. I'm not going to stop to read the whole one. I mean, I read it on my own, but so Frank is saying that the Bluetooth connection would be precise from John's phone to Karen's vehicle. I do agree with that, Frank. I've always wondered, shouldn't John's phone have had some kind of a connection to Karen's vehicle, even through AirTags? AirTags are in phones and devices, and they automatically try to connect. It doesn't form an actual connection, but this kind of, I'm not sure if I explained that well, but they try to form this very low level rudimentary connection in case you need to link up for some reason. So, for instance, if you come to visit my house and you have an iPhone and you try to log into the Wi-Fi, and I'm sitting there, I will get a thing on my Wi-Fi saying, "Let Frank Westland log into my Wi-Fi." So I believe that connection is made through an AirTag. So you have these those low-level connections leave a log, can be visible in the log of the phone. So was there anything inside? So I think that's similar to what he's saying. So a Bluetooth connection between John's phone and Karen's car. It might explain why she was desperate to locate John's phone in that final lingering voicemail. I'm not sure where you're going with that. One can only wonder if the onboard computer will expose the vehicle height control settings and whether they were activated. I don't know anything about that, especially given the intriguing warnings. So I think he's, I can't, these are technical things that I don't really know anything about. And then there's a bunch of documents here, and thank you, Frank. I will look through them later. It's hard to, I don't know. It's hard to look through them now. Let's see. So these look like technical documents on the Lexus. So he has the four-wheel active height control suspension. See, these are things I didn't know anything about that, so that's interesting. And the four-wheel active height control adjusts the vehicle height in accordance with driving conditions. Well, I didn't know that. These cars are getting more and more advanced. There are 3 selectable modes: high, normal, and low. Wow, who knew? I had no idea. So, did any of that stuff, is there any evidence in the vehicle data for that? That maybe came through in the chip off, I think is what he's saying. When parking in areas with limited overhead height, after leaving the vehicle or unloading the luggage, the vehicle height may be slightly higher than normal. So he's reading from the instruction manual. To avoid damage to the vehicle, normal mode will be. So these are the different modes that you can change on this. Man, I wouldn't want to drive a vehicle that has this much stuff, because I wouldn't remember how to use it or to change those settings or whatever. It's too much information. I'm not saying Frank's giving me too much information. I'm saying it's too much information for me to want to learn how to do that with my car. So Frank's done a lot of research into the Lexus manual. So maybe Frank can tell us more on the key cycle stuff. He's also included the owner's manual here. So yeah, thank you. That's too much for me to read. But thank you, Frank. And so let us know if you have any. Oh, there's a dude abides imposter in chat. Oh. All right. So attention to the mods. I don't even know if Joe's here, but Thomas, the dude abides, great friend of the channel, tells us there is an imposter. Boy, you made it big when they made an imposter, right? So the imposter is called the real dude abides, and that's a fake account. Tom, are you paying attention? Oh, Joe is here. So Joe and Tom, the real dude abides is an imposter. Oh, okay. And Tom says they're already on it. Okay, very good. All right, great job. Thank you, guys. Oakdale Street. Thank you, Rocco. So that's it. So it's Oakdale Street is where allegedly where Oakdale Street is where they were connected to Cedar Crest Street, and that's where, according to Rich Green's data that says John was going up and down stairs, according to Trooper Garino, they were on Oakdale Street when that began. And he says it's a huge incline drop from Dedham to Fairview. He says 30 feet. And that is actually what Trooper Garino said, that it was measured for 30 feet. And I've actually looked this up myself on Google Maps, and it's 34 feet. So it is a 30 feet change, which is very similar to the 3 stories that the app found. So I think that so that was explained by Trooper Garino, though, but thank you. All right. So, and so this is what I was thinking too. All right. So, anonymous mass lawyer, and I was going to say this earlier because I was thinking the same thing. So if they don't stipulate, if the defense counsel does not stipulate as to the authenticity of those materials, such as the 2020 stuff, all the media materials, if they don't agree to authenticate that, then they will call Jackson and Yannetti to the stand just to authenticate that. And I think they're trying to avoid that. They're trying to give the defense a chance to avoid that. So he says, I think they'll agree to those stipulations. I agree on those. There was a couple other things they might not, but definitely on those media things, they will do that because otherwise they'll be put on the stand. So agreed. And Chick from the Bricks alerted me to that. Thank you, Chick. You're always there saving us. All right. So again, while I was reading that, I wasn't seeing chat. So I guess I'm going to have to keep pointing that out. But while I was reading those emails, I saw nothing in chat. And the real Dude Abides, which is just the Dude Abides, is here. And he said, thanks again. So the mods did a great job, as always. So apparently the fake Dude Abides used his photo. But I've been subject to the same problem on Twitter. There was a fake channel. Dixie Doodles said, so they did approve that Karen will get the headset so she can hear the sidebars. Maybe you want to get some buds for Karen for that. What was the fake real Dude Abides saying? All right. I agree with what you're saying, upping the game, but I'm not going to make a big deal about it. But I agree with you, upping the game. I do agree. Yeah, that's one way you can know the real actual, I shouldn't say the real dude. There's one we know the authentic Dude Abides is from the cleverness of what he says. So I bet the real dude, the fake dude that calls himself the real dude probably doesn't say anything clever. Where is the fake one? I don't even see it. I don't see the fake one. Andy says there was a fake Andy Dufresne a couple of weeks ago. You know you're a player in the case. If for some, I mean, how amazing. You're not even doing a channel. You're just someone commenting in chat and maybe on Twitter or something, and they're making fake accounts of you. How desperate are they? Jesus. Thomas timed out the fake one. Okay. Danny says, Kevin, I'm still waiting for my T-Mobile records. Oh, yeah, that's right. With the call for Alan Jackson. I remember that conversation we had on August 23rd. Says it might have been a burner phone. Well, I don't think there was, the thing that the shady lawyers have done here they're shady, but they're not illegal. That's the issue. So if it's not illegal, and even if it is illegal, I don't think Brennan is going to care about it, because Brennan, despite what people think, this is one thing that Vinny, I think, falsely understands on Court TV. He keeps thinking that the defense tried to get rid of Alan Jackson. They made no such move. Brennan made no such movement to get rid of Alan Jackson, and he doesn't want to get rid of Alan Jackson because then it's going to be a lengthy delay, postponement in the trial. They don't want that. I got to get a standing desk so I can stand up. I'm tempted to switch over to the headset and talk on that mic for a bit just to stretch. This is where probably, you know what I could do? Somebody had left a really good, potentially good video in the Discord. Let me open up my Discord and see here. $7:46. All right. So I think that filing. All right. So our always reliable and our buddy Nima from Sweden had a link to a Court TV discussion. Let's see how long this is. Ooh, it's too long. Yeah. If it was like a 5 or 10 minute discussion, I could take a break and let this go on. We can maybe segment of it, but what is playing? All right. Let me pull this on so that we can see this. And I'm going to take this on so I can hear it. And we'll just play a few minutes of this Court TV thing. And that gives me a chance to stretch a little bit.
Versus the right in politics. That divide seeped into the jury room as the first trial ended with a deadlocked jury. Now, the battle lines have been drawn, and both sides are preparing for this epic retrial of the century.
And that's not an exaggeration. There's never been a retrial quite like this, with this much anticipation and buildup. And all the battles that were fought the first time around, there are new battles that are being fought in the buildup to this case. And this coverage of this trial, to me, is so much different because of what is happening outside of the courthouse. And we've covered trials where there are protests and people are saying this or that. This is different. This is different. You have people who had no connection to Karen Read, people who didn't know Karen Read, didn't know John O'Keefe, but learned about the story and got invested in what was happening. And they are what I call true believers, people who absolutely believe Karen Read is 1,000% innocent, and that there's something wrong with our system.
This feels familiar.
And they've made
this was
themselves
the show
known,
I was on.
so much so that the judge had to create special rules to keep them away from the courthouse during the first trial. Take a look.
Karen Read was framed, and the world knows it. We have been subjected to domestic terrorism. We will not be terrorized anymore. Free Karen Read! Free Karen Read!
How stupid do they think we are? How stupid and lying state trooper Michael Proctor has accused our trust.
She's been framed.
She has to be exonerated. This is insane. I'm excited to see her have her day.
That was the first case. And I mean, they showed up pre-trial hearings, pre-trial motions. They were there. Then during the trial, they're there day in and day out. They're there when Karen Read arrives in the morning. They are there when Karen Read leaves at the end of the day. But they can't get into the courthouse because they're in this little tiny courtroom for this huge case. But I'm wondering, as we get ready now for the retrial of the century, I've got a question. It's our first question of our investigation. Does Karen Read have more support now? Right? The first time this trial went, people knew about the trial. Locally, obviously, they knew about it, but nationally, it wasn't quite there. From my perspective, the case and the story has become bigger since the first trial. So let's try to answer this question. Joining me, Karen Read supporter and creator of the Justice for Officer John O'Keefe and Karen Read Facebook page, Nick Rocco is with us. And joining us on the phone right now, author of the book, Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Read Trial, Kevin Lenahan is with us as well. Some dramatic intro there for Nick. All right, Nick, let me ask you, from your group, right? From your Facebook group, are there more people joining now? Is the temperature of their passion higher now than it was?
So just to pause for a second. So when he mentions his Facebook group, this is the Facebook group that's Turtle Boy official. And there's a lot of friction between Nick Rocco and Jenna Rocco and Turtle Boy. Turtle Boy is the source of that friction. It's not the Roccos. They know that he is and has been for over a year envious and is doing what he can to scheme behind the scenes to take them down. In my opinion, the Roccos have just tried to be the adults in the room and stay focused on the challenge at hand and try to stay unified. And they've put aside knowing what Turtle Boy is and what he does in order to do that. So I'm not going to play this whole show. We'll play a little bit more, and you guys can see how it goes. It gives me a chance to rest.
Was it the first trial? Is it the same? Is it less? What are you sensing?
I think more and more people are outraged. There were people in this movement in the way beginning, but also people got to witness the first trial, and people who didn't know about it now do know about it. So what's going to happen now is I think you're going to see more people outside. We have about, I would say, 100 to 200 people joining the Facebook group daily and voicing their concerns about what's happening in Norfolk County. And I think it goes bigger than just the Karen Read case. I think it just goes to the corruption in what Judge Beverly Cannoni is doing in the courtroom. And I know, Joe Krowski had mentioned the other night was you have a judge who is pro-defense. We've all watched this case. She is not pro-defense. She absolutely does not like them. But I don't think that's going to stop the supporters from showing up. I think even if the buffer zone is now 300 feet, 400 feet, they're still going to be there showing up regardless.
Now, Kevin, let me ask you from your perspective. Do you get a sense that since this first trial happened, since this the coverage, the talking, the documentaries that are out, that there is more knowledge by the general public now, crossing out of the people who watch court TV, crossing over the people who are true crime aficionados, like into the general population of people. Do you see this case going there? And do you get the sense that those people?
So let's do this, have a little fun here. So I don't get this question ahead of time. So let me just replay the question for you guys, and just be thinking to yourself, how would you answer this question? I'm sure there's a lot of ways that people could come up with a better answer than me. So, but let's do that. I just want to say too, I'm looking at on my other monitor, there's a comment in this morning's video. Plevin, you are, this is from Natalie Joni. Plevin, you are exploiting Karen with your book, not written by you. You would have no money without her case. Shame on you. So this person who doesn't know me, has not read the book, knows that the book was not written by me. So it's just stupid, because like, if the book sucked, why wouldn't you say that book's awful when it's written? But she's just going to say not. Well, who wrote the book? Chloe? Come on. It's freaking crazy. But these people are nuts. They amuse me, though. I have to admit, there's an amusing. I have not made $1 off the book, and I doubt I ever will. I didn't write it for that reason. It may even be the experience of it was so difficult. It may be part of the reason my health situation is. It may have contributed to that. I didn't, when the first trial ended, I had no intention of writing a book. And really, people have said, they noticed that I was kind of quiet for the month of July. I just was burned out and didn't really want to discuss the case. And as the hearings started getting back going again, I started thinking about doing a video series to just explain the case, explain the evidence. And meanwhile, I was researching on the side, and that's, the evidence, and that's how I came up with that bulletproof correlation that chick from the bricks helped me put together. And then at some point, I had a discussion with Kevin Mahoney about doing a book, and so I decided just to go ahead and do a book. And once I decide to do something, I do usually try to finish it. And a couple months into the writing of it, look back and to see what I had was encouraging enough to go forward. It needed a lot of work and, hard to make it entertaining or interesting. Reached out to the publisher. I think in October, they signed it up. Then in December, the publisher decided they didn't want to publish it until after the trial. So they said, stop working on the book because a lot's going to change during the trial. So, all right, I stopped working on it. Then in January, they changed their mind. They said, but we need it as quick as possible. So I had to hurry. And so I'm actually already seeing people have sent me photos that they were delivered today, their hard copy of the book. I don't even have a hard copy of the book. So thank you very much for that support. Hopefully you will find enough or some parts of that book to be interesting or revealing or whatever. In any case, let's replay Vinny's question here. And then you guys see what you would do to answer it. And then we'll see. I don't even remember what my answer was, to tell you the truth.
Well, are supporting Karen Reed, or are you seeing something else?
I think Nick said the quiet.
Oh, I didn't go back far enough. Let me replay Vinny's question.
She absolutely does not like them. But I don't think that's going to stop the supporters from showing up. I think even if the buffer zone is now 300 feet, 400 feet, they're still going to be there showing up regardless.
Now, Kevin, let me ask you from your perspective. Do you get a sense that since this first trial happened, since the coverage, the talking, the documentaries that are out, that there is more knowledge by the general public now, crossing out of the people who watch court TV, crossing over the people who are true crime aficionados, like into the general population of people? Do you see this case going there? And do you get the sense that those people are supporting Karen Reed, or are you seeing something else?
So what do you guys think about that? What would you say? And what would you say if you're trying to do it from my perspective? So, or from the perspective of they kind of expect me to argue with Nick a little bit. And, from my perspective, there is definitely much more support for Karen than for that side of the argument than the other, much more. And I just get evidence of that all the time, all the time. So what does it mean? Does it mean, so as somebody told me today, polls have showed that 24% of the public believes that the Sandy Hook massacre of those school kids was a false flag event. That those, I think even the suggestion was that there weren't even any dead kids, that it was all a manufactured event. 24% of the American public. And so that's about 70,000 people. So, I'm sorry, 70 million people. So 70 million, I think it's actually more than that, isn't it? It would be, I think it would actually be over 100 million people because the population of the country is probably about 350 million now. So you're talking about 100 million people believe that the Sandy Hook massacre of those poor kids didn't really happen. So just because a lot of people believe in something doesn't mean shit.
I think Nick said the quiet part out loud a couple of weeks ago when he talked about how we now know that the federal investigation is over and they didn't find anything of interest, nothing exculpatory, nothing that led to charges, and but that their goal is really to make this a public relations campaign and hope that you get a couple of people on the jury that reject the evidence, and that then you make the case later on that it's too expensive to do a third trial. I think that's what we're looking at here. But I do think that the PR campaign has been very effective, and the majority of the public is only looking at the issues that the defense raises. Many of these things that have been, pretty much most of them, debunked by the evidence in the trial. But they don't see that, and they just see this kind of superficial thing that looks really mysterious and intriguing and interesting. And I just hope that they'll be willing to pay attention. I hope, really what matters is the jury will not come into this with preconceptions and just listen to the evidence carefully and be objective, honest, diligent jurors.
Let me ask you, Nick, because Kevin said this was like a PR campaign. From your perspective, do you see yourself as part of a PR campaign?
I've been accused of being paid, and I've been accused of being part of the defense PR team since the beginning. Nobody is part of a PR campaign. Nobody has been paid by the defense team to speak our minds and our opinions. Everybody who is out there is authentic and real. And a lot of us don't hide behind, Twitter accounts. We're all out there and we all show our faces.
I don't know what he's, I didn't say he was paid. I didn't say he was part of the PR campaign. And I didn't say anybody's been paid. I think it's very likely that there are a couple of people, I guess we'll avoid saying their names, but let's just say the initials OL, that seem to be paid PR campaign people on Twitter. But for the most part, I would say 99% of the people are not part of a paid campaign. It's Karen and the defense team. It clearly comes through from these, even just what little we learned today about the messages between Yannetti and Jackson and Turtle Boy, that they have deliberately run this campaign. And you don't have to pay Turtle Boy. Turtle Boy is making like $35,000 a month just from YouTube. And he makes more whatever selling T-shirts and stuff like that. He's making a lot of money by grifting on the conspiracy theory. Doesn't have to be paid. And in various other ways, most of these other content creators are the same thing. Melanie Little, Young Jelly. I'm not going to list them all, but you guys get the point. And it's still a PR campaign, but it's run. It's not that everybody out there is fake. No, the majority of people are just taking this effective strategy put out by the defense and running with it.
We all go on camera and we speak to local news, and everybody's there. Everyone's real. There's no paid protesters. The defense is not trying to, have this crowd outside to potentially get put on the jury pool. all 12 jurors voted not guilty for 2 counts, and they were hung on one count. So it's not us out there that's doing this. It's what's happening.
He said that, like I said, he said the quiet part out loud a couple of weeks ago when the federal investigation, it was announced it was over. And he said it doesn't bother him because they've already done their damage in this trial. So the federal investigation, even though the jury was not instructed about it in the first trial, the defense was allowed to present ARCA as independent. And, it didn't seem to have much of an influence on the jury because they weren't sure who these ARCA guys were, and they were presented by the defense. But I think what Nick has said a couple weeks ago, that they feel that, in fact, he followed it up by saying, not only do we feel we've managed to get their message out to the public, which you're saying you want to contaminate the jury pool, but he said, and we know they aren't going to want to pay for a third trial. So what he's saying is we're not going to, he understands, Nick recognizes, we're not going to get an acquittal. We know the evidence. So that implies that Nick must know the evidence now too. We're not going to, because one by one, we've seen Nick say things on court TV, been on with him many times since, in May and June and many times since. And all the claims that he made were debunked. Everything. And it must have been shocking from his perspective to see it, because I think he was a true believer. Whether it's evidence, be it in the back of Michael Proctor's car for 6 weeks, or the mysterious semicolon on Ally McCabe's text messages, or just the many other weird theories that he bought into, missing shoe, missing sneaker, stuff like that, missing belt, missing hat. One by one, all that stuff was eliminated. And so what's left? There's a little bit left. You can so we'll see. Vinny tries to point out about why was John not spotted on the lawn. But there's most of the things that Nick fervently believed are gone, including the fact that the feds were going to swoop in anytime and arrest everybody. He now knows that's over. So by going to the defense of saying that the state is not going to pay for a third trial, that's like saying we know we have a good chance of getting a mistrial. That's the goal now. The goal is not to get 12 jurors to say she didn't do it. And even Nick knows that's not going to happen, which means he finally recognizes that evidence. He just doesn't want to say it.
Happening in the courtroom, ultimately, that is the final decision. And now we have one of the jurors being one of her lawyers. I mean, if that doesn't speak volumes, then I don't know what else to say to the people who believe she's guilty.
What volume does that speak? What does that tell? The fact that a juror has joined Karen's defense team and misled Christina Rex, apparently, by giving her that statement as though she was just a disgruntled juror speaking up for justice, when clearly, based on that Vanity Fair article, she had already formalized a deal to work for the defense, but she didn't tell Christina Rex that. Now, if this juror was honest, she would have released that. See, they delayed announcing. They told Vanity Fair, because that article was done at that time, but Vanity Fair, they said, wait to publish that until we announce that she's joining our team. Why delay that announcement? The reason is simple, because on the day when Victoria joined Karen's team, they obviously said, listen, you can really do us a lot of help here by putting out a statement with Christina Rex as though you're just a juror. So we'll delay announcing that you're joining the team. That was all coordinated ahead of time. It's shady. It's dishonest. So that juror is now as shady and dishonest as Alan Jackson and David Yanni.
By the way, one of the reasons I asked this question is we got this press release. Apparently there's a nationwide...
So Nick gets 2 bites at the apple here. I got 1. And after the break, they came to me, right? Nope.
Absolutely. I mean, the people who run the standouts, they're a part of the Justice page, the Facebook page that we run. There is a website you can go to see basically every week where there are standouts. You have standouts every weekend, multiple weekends, all the time. This is a nationwide standout where I believe this is the 3rd one. And you just have towns all over Massachusetts, all over different states, and even some in Australia, in the UK, and Ireland, who participate in these nationwide standouts. People are outraged. They don't believe Karen Reed did this. And I know we've been accused of being a mindless mob, but are all these people mindless? I mean, you have people in other countries who are doing this. They're not part of a mob. I'm not part of a mob. I just truly believe that she's innocent. So we stand out and we put ourselves out there and we get criticism for it. But it is what it is because we believe in something.
Kevin, what are your
a mob doesn't have to be in person. I don't know if Nick has heard of there's this thing called the internet. And a mob can exist in social media.
thoughts about what's taking place here? I'm looking at all the towns where these standouts are taking place. There's a ton of them in Massachusetts, like Weymouth and Worcester. They're going to have one there. They're going to have it in Walpole. Then Bristol, Connecticut, Cumberland, Rhode Island. You've got Manchester, New Hampshire, Portland, Maine, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, Orlando down in Disney, San Diego, California. What's going on here, Kevin?
Well, first of all, I do want to say that I do actually believe that Nick is not part of a paid PR campaign, that he does fervently believe in Karen's innocence and has, since this first became a popular story in 2023. So I'm definitely not accusing Nick of that. What I'm accusing of is the defense team and the defendant of waging a PR campaign, the purpose of which is to contaminate the jury pool. And we've never seen, I don't think, anything like it in recent history or in modern history. So, but yeah, there's no question that there's a fervent belief system that's out there. And one of the things that we'll have to study for many years after this is what about this case resonated with so deeply with people. They're just looking at the surface of this. Is it their distrust of cops? Is it because you have a middle-aged white woman who has no criminal history? Do they see themselves in that? Do they just mistrust authority of the system? You know, I don't know. I think it's really something that has to be studied. You know me, I just focus on the evidence. It's nothing against Karen. And there are charges that I don't know that she had any intent to do anything wrong here in terms of that night. But the evidence is overwhelming, linking John Seth to her Lexus. And not just overwhelming, but really irrefutable. And I hope the jury will see that in the trial.
All right, Nick and Kevin are going to stick around. We got a lot to get to this hour. Coming up next, will any jurors have an agenda?
There was no Krowski on this show tonight. So they go to a segment where they do Dennison and Peter Ellickson. They show a little bit of the interview with Ronnie, the juror. And then they come back for a quick segment with. So let's see if we can go to this.
Joining me, Karen Reed supporter, creator of the Justice for Officer John O'Keefe and Karen Reed Facebook page, Nick Rocco, and the author of the book Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Reed trial, Kevin Lenahan, with us. All right, let me start here, and then let me put this up on the screen because I think this is one of the big issues in the case, obviously. The lead investigator, Trooper Proctor, the state police trial board fired Massachusetts State Police investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor. It dishonorably
Well, he was found guilty.
Every single episode, I take the over under on whether Vinny's going to ask me a question first, but he always goes to Nick first. That's all right.
Is Trooper Proctor for the Commonwealth here?
Well, he was found guilty of 4 different charges by the trial board, and one of them, you know, the text messages was bad. Him driving his cruiser while he was working, drinking, that's bad. But I think the biggest one is the fact that he was found guilty of being biased in this case. And I think once the jury hears that he was biased in this case, anything that he touched or had to do with, I think the jury is not going to believe to be true and accurate, which I think anybody who sees this case believes the same thing. It's that him being fired is going to have a huge impact at the way the jury sees this case going forward. And now the defense is saying it's a cover-up, and you have the lead investigator being fired for his conduct in this case, whether it's text messages, you know, leaking information to non-law enforcement, or the other one just being biased, which is now a known fact. That's not going to be good.
So I want to say, I do hope that Hank Brennan is paying attention, not necessarily to this program, on court TV. But to what the alternative juror has said, for instance, in that Vanity Fair article, and her main issue. Now, listen, I think this person was a free Karen Reed person, probably when she got on the jury, to a degree. Although at the same time, she probably in her mind said, "I'm going to be objective." But she was someone that she's only 34 years old, and this is her third jury trial. So I don't know how she ends up on all these juries. That's really strange. And she was a foreman on one. She clearly wanted to be a foreman on this. So she's one of those people that wants to insert herself into the narrative. And again, I'm not saying that she's lying or anything like that. I'm just saying people's motivations can be murky even to themselves. And that's so you get kind of a dishonesty that is based on just not being honest with yourself. But I hope that that Brennan is paying attention, that from the alternative juror's point of view, the fact that Michael Proctor demonstrated in their minds a bias in those messages, that therefore the fruit of the poison tree, everything is now, all the evidence in this is polluted. And what I hope Hank Brennan, I hope he has a way to countermand that, because there are going to be jurors on this case that once they hear those messages, they might be tempted to dismiss things and say this whole investigation was corrupt, but that's not the case. So you'll see my answer.
Evan Lenahan, this is. I mean, we cover trials here on Court TV. That's all we do. I've never seen anything quite like this, where the lead investigator is now gone. The lead investigator is biased. This is problematic. This is like, we're not quite there, but we're close to like Mark Furman country here.
So there are two things that I'd like people to remember about this. One is that there is no evidence at all. Nothing was uncovered that showed Michael Proctor planting evidence, manufacturing evidence, or in any way fudging the investigation. But if you want to Mark Furman this guy and reject any evidence that he was connected to, fine, go ahead. The fundamental evidence that shows Karen's Lexus struck John O'Keefe has nothing to do with Michael Proctor. The main evidence, the taillight pieces that were found in a debris pattern near where John's body was found, those were not collected by Michael Proctor. Those main pieces that were found that night were found by the CERT team. Michael Proctor never went to the crime scene that day. The fundamental evidence is the vehicle data that shows Karen going in reverse at 24 miles an hour for 60 or 70 feet. And the way that correlates with the location data and the Waze data on John's phone. And also that's a bulletproof correlation that shows exactly what time John was struck by the Lexus. In addition, the GPS on John's phone shows that he never went inside the house. So if you want to get rid of all the Proctor evidence, go ahead. It doesn't really impact the fundamental evidence of this case.
Now, I want you to take a listen to the cross-examination of Caitlin Albert.
Okay, so let's just, enough of listening to that. There's too much listening to more of me there, right? And but anyways, I think Michael Proctor would agree with that. I don't know him personally, but I think that's what he would want to be said, is that he's not going around individually collecting each piece of evidence. And he tried to say that on the stand, and I think he said it very effectively, that the integrity of this investigation was never compromised. He looked at the jury when he said it forcefully. He clearly was not lying. So, but I mean, I think you could, but if the fundamental evidence relied on Michael Proctor finding the bloody glove or something like that, then maybe you could find an excuse to dismiss it. But what Brennan has to point out to this jury is that Michael Proctor was just, their role is kind of as a case administrator. He's directing the other investigators around. And so he's directing the criminologist to go to the crime scene, to document finding pieces of evidence. He's coordinating. He's doing all that kind of thing. And so there's no way that he could have, the main taillight pieces that link Karen's Lexus to what happened was found by the CERT team at 5:45. And there's no way that those pieces could have been planted. That's fundamental. So even if you think he, for some reason, planted some other pieces 3 weeks later, those pieces aren't even necessary. Fine, take them away. The main pieces that were found that night, that's the main thing. The GPS data that shows that John never went in the house, that's not gathered by Michael Proctor. That's gathered by Trooper Garino. The vehicle data was collected by Trooper Paul. There's no blemish anywhere, ever, on Trooper Paul's record. All right? This is a guy, I know some people out there just want to hate the state police for some reason. Maybe they got a speeding ticket. Maybe they just seen too many movies and bad TV shows. I mean, here's a guy that fought for his country. And now he's dedicated his life to service. And he's just an honest guy doing his job. He's clearly not a guy that wants to be at the center of the spotlight. Just wants to do his job. And that's what he did. And he put together that vehicle data and put together a lot of the key accident reconstruction data too, like where the individual pieces were found. So that stuff has nothing to do with Michael Proctor. And again, I'm not knocking Michael Proctor, but I'm saying because, look, if in every investigation, if you had the feds or somebody go in and get the personal messages of the police investigators, this would come up in almost every trial. It's just the nature of the beast. There's a lot of locker room talk, and it's inappropriate, not defending it. Michael Proctor wouldn't defend it and didn't defend it on the stand. He was embarrassed by it. But it's the reality of life. And the bottom line, though, is that doesn't have this crucial impact on the evidence. And that's what you have to make clear to the jury. I'm not sure how you do that because, well, I mean, obviously, Hank Brennan can do that in closing arguments. And he might even be tempted to do it in opening arguments and say, look, unfortunately, in this trial, you're going to hear some texts by the lead investigator that are going to make you uncomfortable. But none of that evidence, none of the key evidence in this case was collected by him. So keep that in mind. I don't know whether it's worth bringing that up. I mean, look, sometimes you want to prepare the jury, right, for what's coming. So I don't know. Funny Bunny, we love you too. Thank you very much. You're an important part of the family here. Caroline Sweet up in Canada. Thank you, Caroline. Always appreciate it. And Thrift Chick, $3. Thank you very much, Thrift. And the Pilgrim Shadow. Thank you for all that you do, Kevin, man of integrity. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the support. Any more questions or anything here? Barb says she lives in New York City, and the cops here say worse than Proctor. Oh, yeah. We know how these city cops, we know how salty those New York City cops can be. But I used to hear this kind of stuff in Worcester. So all right. So Zepp says it's not like they had to fly a helicopter. At the very least, that crime scene should have been taped off and guarded until after the blizzard. All right. They did try to tape it off. There was no way to tape it off during the blizzard. But I do agree with Zepp that the Canton police, or perhaps the state police, should have stationed a squad car to sit there. And they didn't. And that was a mistake. However, it doesn't impact the case. That taillight piece that was found was buried in the snow, and it was there all day. There was no opportunity to tamper with that Lexus vehicle until it had arrived at the Sally Port. And by then it was too late to try to get that stuff over to the crime scene. These are just fundamental facts, Sepp. I'm not trying to fire you up. You have to understand, Zepp, is this. So questions, I don't know about the helicopter part, but the rest of your question and your sentiment, those are things that I shared too for months. All right, and trying to figure out what happened. You may not know this, but remember when I first started covering this case, it was in it was probably less than a week after Turtle Boy started covering it. And I did a series on this channel called Framed with a question mark. So I leaned towards there being a conspiracy. And I asked those kind of questions or did those kind of videos, and my channel started growing. And eventually I started picking up a team around me, a couple of co-hosts, and I cared for them, and maybe a dozen people that were in support. And other than Thomas Fleming, who was stuck with me because we've been friends for a lot longer than this case, everybody left. And that's because I flipped. But I kept asking questions. But before I even officially flipped, I was asking the kind of questions that was pissing them off. And that Free Karen Reed crowd does not tolerate questions. They just don't. So just want you to understand, Zep, that I didn't start out from an anti-Karen side, if you want to call it that, or something like that. I started out just trying to look at the fundamental evidence, the timelines. And the timeline was a big thing for me. And once I found out where the Lexus was all day, then I knew there was no time. And once I found out that and what time the first taillight piece was found, I knew there was no time. And then we got the testimony in the trial from the head of the CERT team, Lieutenant O'Hara, that they dug down to the street level through 3 feet of snow, including an older plow bank. And that's where they found that first taillight piece. That's where they found John's shoe. So that's fundamental. There was no way that taillight piece could have been tampered with and buried there, because throughout the course of the day, that Lexus was either in John's garage, or it was in John's driveway under ring surveillance, or it was in Karen's parents' driveway under video surveillance, or Karen was in the vehicle. So that's where the vehicle was all day. There was no realistic opportunity that anybody could have tampered with it at that point. And then it arrived into the Sally Port at 5:36. And the crime scene, 5 minutes away, the main piece was found at 5:45, 3 feet down. And the CERT team was a 7-man CERT team digging shoulder to shoulder in a space the size of 2 parking spaces. So the timeline really eliminates for any logical person any possibility of that evidence being planted. And if it wasn't planted, Karen did it. Is what it is. Is the investigation perfect? The investigation, was probably run of the mill in many ways. It wasn't super flawed, but it certainly wasn't perfect. Should they have left a cruiser there? Yeah. But it was a hit and run. They probably couldn't conceive of any idea of somebody planting evidence. And it was in a blizzard. It's a small town. I don't know. They should have had someone there. They didn't, but it doesn't really impact the case. So let me just briefly go on this. So when they released the picture, maybe late, if Karen released this from Discovery, maybe late in December 23, and late in the summer of 2023, that taillight piece showed the trooper with his shovel next to it, and that piece is on top of the stone. That's the corner piece, that first one they found. And we've seen that picture from the trial now too. And so they tried to suggest that somebody walked out and dropped that piece in the snow, like Andy Dufresne, not our Andy Dufresne, but Andy Dufresne from the movie, The Shawshank Redemption. But you could see the shovel marks in the snow. So people that are Free Karen Reader and Turtle Riders, oh my God, it's just sitting on the snow. They don't even see the shovel marks. They don't want to know the truth. Where we see the shovel mark, that tells you that was shoveled out. So they shoveled it out. It comes out with the snow, and they drop it right next to it so they can take a picture. That's not sloppy. Now, maybe if they knew there was going to be a conspiracy, you put the taillight in the shovel to make clear that it was shoveled out. But then they would just say there was a manufactured photo. You can't win. So the timeline just does not allow it. And there's other evidence. And like I said, that's what I flipped on that. But now we know so much more. And the main thing for me is that correlation of the vehicle data with the phone data. That's bulletproof. You can't fake it. All right. There's no reasonable doubt. There's no reasonable doubt. No, I'm giving you the evidence, and I want you to look at it. I don't want you to just dismiss it. Zep, I'm talking respectfully to you. I don't want you to just dismiss the evidence I'm giving you because you've already decided that there's reasonable doubt. Because you may not have understood all the expert evidence. Not because I'm smarter than you, but because I've looked at it longer, right? So I want you to look at all of the evidence. Now, if you look at the timeline, like I said, you'll see there was just no opportunity to plant those primary taillight pieces. And if those pieces weren't planted, then Karen did it. There's no middle ground on that. Either they were planted or Karen did it. Then I also want you to look. I'm not going to talk about it at length because I've talked about it many times on this channel. You can email me and I'll email you a graph that Chick from the Bricks helped me make up, a graphic. But it shows within a few seconds exactly what time John was struck. And that's a correlation between the vehicle data and the GPS and Waze data. And there's no way anybody could have manufactured that. There's no way. So when you weigh on one side dots about both, you can have doubts based on butt dials, legitimate, right? You can have doubts based on the fact that nobody saw a body in the snow. Okay. You can have doubts based on what was the other about on Proctor. So you could look at those things and say, I have no evidence that Michael Proctor planted evidence ever in any case, but he didn't like Karen, so maybe, right? Okay, that's fine. I'm okay with you doing that. But on the other side, you have to line up all the key evidence and find if there's any way that evidence could have been manufactured or be off in any way. All right, so Drop says, why are we not emphasizing that glass in John's nose? I mean, because we don't really know how to process. Like, it's a statement she made in a documentary, so we don't or to Ted Daniel, I forget. But we don't really. What does it mean? It's interesting. It's very interesting, but I don't know I don't see how that really becomes a decisive piece of evidence. The fact that she made that statement, because we don't know why she said it. She might even legitimately have a false memory of this. So Karen's hands were covered in blood. When they did the CPR, there was a lot of blood in John's mouth. Remember, John had a laceration on his tongue. And that blood got on her hands, on her face. So if she did see a piece of glass on the nose and she reached up and touched it, again, remember, this is before the first responders arrived and she's hysterical, right? She may have got her own blood, well, not her own blood, the blood that she had on her hands from John's mouth on the nose. And then her memory later on, memory is a funny thing. She may have said, oh my God, I pulled that out and John's nose poured blood. That seems unlikely. Do you have glass in your nose and you pull it out and it pours blood? I don't think the human body works that way without getting into too many details on it. Your blood vessels what is it called? Vascular sealing or something like that. They close up. There's no way that's just not how it would work. But that doesn't mean she's lying. She might actually have some false memory in her brain based on touching that. Now, I did find it interesting. I think this is where Drops of Jupiter was going, is doesn't that tend to show, well, more than likely that what she calls glass was taillight glass. Oh, I'm sorry, cocktail glass was probably a piece from the cocktail glass. I've never seen a fight inside the house, I've never seen a fight in a bar where, and there's a lot of glass in bars, and I've seen a lot of glass stuff thrown around and stuff, but where a little shard of it ends up in somebody's face. I haven't seen something like that. So much more likely that glass came from the cocktail glass, right? So I think what Drops of Jupiter is saying is that weird little bit of story is strangely somehow inculpatory a little bit of Karen, or certainly makes it seem more like John was killed outside. So, all right, I'm gonna have to wrap up soon. And thank you for bearing with me. So let's see if anybody, I try to make sure I answer all questions or get across any big comments. Does anybody have a question or something they really want to say? And I'm trying to look for it. Initially, the report was unresponsive man in the snow. I'm not respectfully, I don't really know the point. So Buchanan testified at first understood it as a possible heart attack because he wasn't there. There was no report that somebody told him there was a possible heart attack. So you're reading into things. Remember, she asked if she had her period. I mean, but why would she lie on that? I think that's shows just how unglued her mind was in that moment and kind of still drunk, Wicket, I love you more. And upping the game Whatever you say, make sure you're respectful to Pale Yellow because she is one of my 2 or 3 best friends in the world. So JoJo doesn't believe the story about the nose glass. And certainly, I don't think Kerry Roberts and Jen remembered anything like that, but they might not. Amber has so many questions for both sides. All right, so Amber, feel free to email me. Sometimes it's hard to do a long email, but I'll try. So leetskev@gmail.com. Or join us in the Discord. You can email and I'll invite you that, and you can come in and I'll answer your questions. And hi, Rosewater. How are you doing? Good night. Hope you're having a good night. Hopefully you're dancing on a bar right now because it is a Friday night. You're doing a little Coyote Ugly to your favorite song, kicking up some fun. I don't know what Joe is. I'm sorry. Up in the game is saying no one answers. I've answered every question in this case, so I'm not saying every answer is perfectly satisfying to people, but I've answered every question. Callie Trish, thank you so much for ordering that. I can't wait to see it too. I haven't seen it yet, but some people sent me pictures of it. They got theirs already, which is amazing because it's only 3. It just doesn't come out till the 1st. But I'm sorry that's expensive. I have nothing to do with the prices, and I would guess that I don't know. I don't know if this is because it's a small publisher. Thank you, Lisa. It's a small publisher. I don't know if they print up in bulk and ship these off to stores, or they're doing the print on demand. Because nowadays, if you self-publish, this is not self-published, but if someone self-publishes, you can do print on demand. And so maybe the publisher did that. I really don't know. But if it's print on demand, that would explain the higher price. Maybe I really don't know. I promise you, I won't ever see any of that money. So I'm not sure. I don't know why there's a discussion about Maui, but I would say, like I said the other day, I consider us all family, and we have a little bicker once in a while, and so hopefully she would feel about it the same way. Thank you very much, Claire Marie. You know how much I always appreciate you. All right, let's see. So Jeff Pogue, I had a conversation with him on the phone last week. Very nice guy, very smart guy. Used to work for Microsoft development team, and he lives in on the West Coast. So he's looking at us thinking we're crazy, and he's right. So he says, up in the game, asked about the CERT team taillight, and was it presented at trial? It's an interesting question. So I'm not sure what that question means. Was the taillight presented at time? I don't really understand the question. So obviously the taillight was reassembled and presented at trial. I don't know what you mean the CERT team. You mean did the CERT team present that taillight at trial? I'm not sure. I don't really understand. I will look to see if I can get an explanation. I know sometimes it's difficult to. All right, so up in the game, put it up. All right, thank you, Uppin. I asked to explain to me why Mix Valaire never used the CERT pieces in her reconstruction. Who is Mix Valaire? Show me an evidence bag she does that make pieces 1 to 5, dates 129. Who's Mix Valaire? I don't really know what that means. So I think your implication is you think they used other pieces. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm not meaning to be disrespectful. So I guess the belief by upping the game is that the taillight that we were shown at trial, the reassembled taillight, which, and I don't remember the number they used, but it looks like it's about between 90 and 95% of that taillight, so there were still some missing pieces. But that what they reassembled fits perfectly into the broken taillight on Karen's SUV. And what Up in the Game is suggesting is those pieces were not from that taillight. They were somehow put together, cleverly put together. So it's a fake jigsaw puzzle. I mean, is that really the most likely explanation here, right? Is it impossible in life? Look, in quantum theory, there's a 1 in 17 trillion chance that I can walk through this wall. Nothing's impossible in quantum theory. So everything can be assigned a probability. It's the same thing. So is it impossible that somebody took the other assembled pieces, took false pieces and assembled them into a taillight that perfectly fit the missing piece? I can't say that it's impossible, but you're getting into more and more elaborate conspiracy theories here. Is it impossible that the McAlberts also work for the CIA and they brought in a CIA team to rig this case? Yeah, okay, there's a level of possibility there. 1 in 4 trillion, something like that. But it's you don't have to prove a case beyond all doubt. You have to prove a case beyond reasonable doubt. And that is not reasonable doubt, especially when combined with all of the other evidence. How many people would have to be involved in doing something like that? I mean, for no motive. There is no motive for Michael Proctor to want to frame Karen Reed, despite what you think. Because if you want to think he had a bias against her, but remember, if she's an innocent woman, right? Let's say Michael Proctor knew that somebody else killed John O'Keefe. Let's just say the boogeyman. And he knew that Karen Reed was an innocent woman. Well, would he have that bias against her? No. The bias is because he believed Karen killed this cop who, no doubt his investigation turned up was a beloved man. And his bias probably would have been impacted by the bizarre behavior that she exhibited when they met her at the house that day. And who knows what other factors went into this before the time when he was making those statements. So if he has a bias against Karen Reed, that bias is from believing she's the killer. Now, if you want to suggest, look, it is a problem in police cases when investigators develop tunnel vision. So if you believe Michael Proctor developed tunnel vision because he believed that Karen did it, and you want to create doubt about that, well, that's a legitimate defense strategy. But that's a very different thing than saying Michael Proctor planted that evidence. It's. All right. Well, yeah, I'm running out of patience up in the game because, comprehending what? That somebody got this jigsaw piece. So I guess the theory is that somebody, and I'm not going to answer more questions tonight, Upping, because people get mad at me. So your theory is that they went and took a piece. They went to the junkyard and they got a similar model Lexus and they took a marker and drew. So first they went to the Sally Port and using some kind of wax paper or something, made up the exact dimensions of the gap. And then they took that and they went to a junkyard and found a similar model and they made sure they cut out the taillight so that it would match Karen's Lexus. And then they took that and smashed it into pieces. And maybe they took a few and threw them out so it wouldn't look too perfect. And then they gave that to the criminologist. Is that the theory? I mean, dude, if that's your theory, I don't know, man. One of us is drinking, and unfortunately, it's not me. All right. I'm perfectly happy to take a break and let you guys, if you have a question, I'll take it on, but I'm perfectly happy to let you guys, I know you're having a good time discussing in chat, and so you kind of don't really need me. So I'll just relax for a minute and let you guys kind of talk. I haven't quit yet, Dina. Pale Yellow is my friend Dina. Yeah, I don't know what to say up. And I mean, if you're trying too hard to make a conspiracy fit where it doesn't fit, and there's so much other evidence. There's just, it's irrational. Your belief system is going down the road of believing that the Sandy Hook massacre didn't happen. It's in the same category. If you believe that somebody is smashing off chunks of taillight and then smashing those pieces and feeding them to the criminologist, how did but further, then they have to also make up the vehicle data, because I've said the vehicle data, and that vehicle data correlation with the phone data is really the bulletproof data. So how do you explain that? Do you believe that which genius do you think was clever enough to create that when they weren't even allowed to show that at trial? You know what I'm saying? They weren't even, I'm sorry, the Trooper Garino and Trooper Paul never had each other's evidence, each other's reports. So they couldn't make that all important correlation. So how could, if they weren't even allowed to make that, so they weren't aware of it. I guarantee Trooper Paul and Trooper Garino had never had any idea the way that data correlated. They did not know. So is it just random luck that correlation matches up perfectly to show also with John's time that it last moved at 12:32 and 16 seconds? There is, now you're talking about, I have a better chance of walking through that mall. You're getting into the 1 in 17 trillion chances. This stuff is beyond 9/11 conspiracy stuff. It's beyond it. You just don't want to see the evidence. And that's all I can say is at this point, the people that don't see it really just don't want to. Anthony's here. Good to see you, my man. Why would Karen say he didn't look mortally wounded? I think it's because if you watch that interview, although we don't, it's edited, so we don't see the exact sequence of things. But when I watched that live, it was because the edited, the part that makes TV later, like online, is shorter. But when I watched it live, the reporter asked her, when you first found John, did he look dead? And so that's what she was talking about. Yeah, everybody's in on it, right, Bob? Everybody's in it. I'm in on it, of course. I framed Karen Reed. All right. So I don't want you guys to think I'm ignoring this. I just want to ask this question to Upping, since no one else is asking me a question. So I'm not ignoring anybody else's question. Please let the record show. Upping, do you have an answer for what I just said about the GPS data, about the vehicle data? Do you have an answer for that? The Waze data, the correlation, The fact that the GPS shows John never went in the house. Do you have an answer for that? You're focusing on, strangely, on the idea that these taillight pieces don't actually belong to Karen's Lexus. All right, they'll put that to, let's dismiss that evidence for now, okay? You find you find doubt in that evidence. Okay. I'll accept, for the sake of argument, let's accept that. Let's take the taillight evidence. This is ridiculous, but let's take that taillight evidence and let's throw it out. Let's not consider it. Now you have to explain the correlation between the vehicle data and John's phone, which shows that Karen struck a pedestrian-sized object at 12:32 and roughly 12 seconds. You cannot ignore that. All right. So now let's bring back the taillight for the moment, the reassembled taillight. So what is let's assign a probability to that, the fact that somebody reassembled that taillight doesn't belong to Karen's Lexus. So there's an elaborate enough manufacturing here that taillight piece that was presented in court does not belong, that reassembled taillight does not belong to Karen's Lexus. What are the odds of that? What do you think the odds are? And we'll be generous here, right? So to me, that's like a 1 in a million, but I'm going to be generous. I'm going to say 1 in 100. Is that reasonable? So there's a 1 in 100 chance. You know what? I'll be more generous than that. Let's be more generous than that. Let's say there's a 1 in 10 chance, 10% chance that taillight, reassembled taillight, was not from Karen's Lexus. I mean, that's pretty out there, right? But that's doable, 10%, If you tell me if you were to tell me I have a 10% chance of still being alive in a couple of years, I'd be grateful. I'd be like, all right, I like that odds. So if you're going to go 10% here, okay. But need to understand that in addition, there's other evidence. So you have to look at the vehicle data, and you have to look at the GPS data. All right. So let's just, instead of there's different aspects of that, but let's just say that key correlation. Well, in order for somebody to manufacture that taillight piece, if there's a conspiracy, if there's someone that put together a false taillight, let's not say it's impossible. And I'm saying 1 in 10. That's 10% chance. That's pretty damn, because it's super unlikely and would involve several people who would have no motive. But let's just still give it that 1 in 10 chance. But if that happened, if somebody reassembled the wrong taillight, then that means that also the vehicle data had to be manufactured. If there's a conspiracy, both things have to be manufactured. Both things. Both key pieces of evidence. So what is the chance? So if you take the 1 in 10 chance on that, now let's assign a probability to manufacturing the GPS data, for example. You'd have to be like the CIA level shit to manufacture GPS data. John's phone extraction, that's not just Trooper Garino telling you what the GPS data is. Both sides have the same phone extraction. And from that phone extraction, they use a program that plots the GPS. And notice in the trial, no, you probably didn't notice this, did you, Upping? If you watched the trial, the defense never once questioned the accuracy of the GPS location data. They never once questioned the accuracy of the locationality of it. What they tried to question was the clock. And they said maybe somehow the GPS was attached to a different internal clock within the Apple system. It's ridiculous. GPS data relies on very accurate time to work. But they didn't question it. All right. So what are the odds that GPS data was somehow manufactured through some elaborate data scheme into the extraction? It'll be hard to do. I guarantee you Trooper Garino would never know how to do that. There's probably not a trooper that works for any police department anywhere in the world that would know how to do that. That would be an elaborate manufacturing of data. Maybe a team of people at the CIA could do that. So in order to say that that GPS data was manufactured, which you have to say if you believe the taillight stuff was manufactured too. So in order to say that, what are you going to assign that odds? Again, 1 in a million, 1 in 10 billion? I don't know. But we'll be generous. I'm going to give that 1 in 100, which is super generous, but 1 in 100 chance that somehow the McAlberts shipped that phone to the CIA or somebody really smart, Ukrainian hackers, and they somehow fixed it. They somehow manufactured that abstraction. So when that abstraction went to the defense and they ran it through the program, I think it's called Axiom, they got the same results as the state. And they did have the same results, and it showed that John never went in the house. So let's say you have a 1 in 10 chance that the taillight that we saw in court did not belong to the Lexus, and a 1 in 100 chance that somehow that GPS data was manufactured. Well, both things need to be true. Both. Can't be one. If one is false, then both are false. If one was manufactured, then the other was manufactured. So what are the chances? If both those things need to be true to make that probability work, you multiply. So now you do 10 times 100. So that means you now have a 1 in 1,000 chance that this conspiracy is true. 1 in 1,000 chance. And that's just one aspect of it. And there's so many other aspects in this case where you'd say, what are the chances that somebody would put a body out on their own lawn? Who would conceive of that? You want to alive. Your plan is to put the victim, you got in a fight with him in your house for some reason. He hit his head. You want to put him on your own lawn breathing? What? That's your plan to kill him? That's your plan to make sure he stays silent and never rats on you? It's so preposterous. And there's just so many other aspects of this. What are the chances that somebody manufactured the vehicle data that showed Karen going back 24 miles an hour and shows in that thing that she has the telltale signs of a pedestrian strike? Is that all made up? And so all these things each one has pretty long odds by itself, but all that has to multiply, each one of them. So you're getting in the trillions, one in several trillions, that there was a conspiracy here. And that's being conservative. Now, you can look at this data, this evidence, if you want to. I know you don't. So I'm looking at your comments and I'm seeing you're just ignoring everything I say. You're zoned in on some little weird thing about the taillight pieces, and that's it. And to you, that's the all important evidence, even though it's kind of weird. That's not something that anybody's talking about. It's not something to defend. All right. So you're zoned in on some piece of evidence. Is it the date on the bag or something? I don't know. It's absurd. But it's not even something the defense has brought up. It's not even something Nick Rocco or Turtle Boy has brought up. But you're bringing it up. And to you, it's this important piece of evidence. And you're going to ignore all of the other evidence that I just pointed out. You're not even going to try to explain it. You're not going to try to tell us why the GPS shows John never went in the house. You're just going to ignore it because you focused on some obscure piece of evidence that the defense doesn't even bring out and no one else does. So, I mean, it's crazy. All right. I will look back for the duck hunter question, and then I'm going to call it a night because I'm tired. All right. All right. So you know what? Duck Hunter? I'm going to tell you something now nicely. I'm not going to answer your question. All right? You say I asked several questions. What am I? Chapped liver? Maybe. Look, several times I've been answering questions for an hour and a half, and there were long periods where I said, I'm just going to sit back and watch chat. And maybe 15 minutes, nobody asked a question. So, chopped liver, you missed your chance. All right? And I even said, I get annoyed with this shit too, because it's so stupid. I said right there, that, look, nobody's asked a question in a long time, and I was studying chat. I said, I said people get upset about this because they feel like I take on too much time talking to the trolls or the free Karen Reed people or something like that. But if nobody's asking, so I was saying nobody's asking a question here. So I am going to answer upping the game's remark or question. But you had long periods there in which to ask a question. You chose not to. And then at some point later, when I was doing something else, now you decided to ask your questions. But I wasn't paying attention. But there's been plenty of other times that I was paying attention and nobody was asking questions, and you're chopped liver, so you didn't know to ask the question, even though I'm saying no one's asking questions. All right, so there you go. There's plenty of other people in this case that can answer questions. People in chat, for the most part, know all the evidence. They can answer your question if you really want to learn about the case. All right. All right, guys. Thank you very much for being here. How'd the Red Sox do? Let me look that up before. Couldn't watch it because we were doing the show. Are they still playing? I'm not getting a score. All right, let me try ESPN. There we go. Why am I seeing basketball scores? Jesus. ESPN got buggy, made me click an extra. It's all right. It's not going to show. I'm on Major League Baseball, and it's showing college scores. Not having much luck today. Why would Major League Baseball show they're just showing college basketball scores, and I'm trying to hit the scores on Major League Baseball. All right, well, we'll find out some other way. Anybody know the Red Sox score? 4-1. 4-1. Oh, they lost 4-1. Okay. Yeah, sorry I asked. All right. All right, so we'll see everybody soon. Trial starts.